Hello, everyone out there, and welcome to another debate dissection with Mark Reed and Ember, where we're going to take apart the second lot of the D'Souza versus Hitchens debate. So, welcome. How are you doing, Ember? How are you feeling?
All right. I mean, I did a blood test today, so I'm a little
Oh,
diminished in my
oh,
blood.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well, this one might not go as well. I know you said there was a Q and A at the end, so we may, like, if you're feeling kind of tired, just let me know and we can kind of, skip it or whatever. So it's fine. It's fine. But we did the first one last week, and that was the Souza. He sucks. He's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah,
Uh,
he certainly hasn't improved with age. Of course, this is backwards in time when you'd expect him to be more terrible, and on the plus side, he's not that much worse.
yeah. All right. Give me 1 second. I'll just get lined up here with share. And I'm doing fantastic. We've got a debate tomorrow morning that is going to be fantastic, starring the lovely Ember on the Marvel side of Marvel versus DC. And on the DC side is Al Trucker, who is beloved by the community. And yeah, it should be a really cool debate. Should be fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I didn't see it personally, so I can't be a witness, Dan. I was not there. It was not me. I
Where's that Ken Ham graphic? Were you there?
I heard about it when I got up this morning. Yeah. So if those are unaware, they're apparently the details are sketchy at the moment, or at least from what I saw, details were kind of sketchy. There's been an alleged assassination attempt against Trump. Apparently it hit like he missed and hit his ear. I did see something like that. Um, Yeah, so I don't know if they've been found. I don't know the circumstance. I don't know anything about it aside from that, but apparently it has happened. It's the breaking news kind of thing. I will just say off the bat, I condemn all political violence. I think that when you start resorting to violence in politics, it never ends well, ever. Even if you support or you would like to see your opponent removed, it will never end well because the other
Mm-hmm.
side will also decide that political violence is what they want to do. And before long, you end up with just political violence on both sides. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, it can descend into an Archduke Ferdinand kind of situation, and
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
badness, very, very, very badness. I can add some details. Trump
Okay.
was shot in the ear. He got an ear piercing at range, but at least one bystander in the crowd is dead, possibly more. The shooter is also has been taken down, and they're claiming that he was a member of Antifa, but there isn't evidence presented to back that up as yet. But yeah, that's where things stand. Trump is fine, and he got some fine. He does have an injury, but it's not even close to life threatening. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, unfortunately, this is another one of the reasons that we don't promote political violence. Bystanders are dead.
Yeah.
People who are neither
Yeah.
the target nor the shooter have lost their lives.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I get there's the it's part of you wants to say, hey, I wish he hit and took him out, but the resulting actions by the other side are never going to be worth it. Like, this will not solve anything. And it's made it that much worse. And like you said, just some random person has died. I mean, it could have been a child, it could have been just somebody who was an actor for Trump. Who knows? I just I condemn all violence, especially that carried it, because if you do, even if you succeed, the other side's going to go, well, that's how we get rid of somebody we don't like. Everybody's going to suffer due to this, and it's yeah. But anyway, let's talk about more intelligent things like D'Souza? Question mark? No, I'm joking.
Interrobang.
Yeah. Well, I haven't launched that yet. I'm think I will launch it on the So I'm coming out with a Discord server. It is called the Interrobang. If those that aren't in the know at the moment, I will launch it in the debate this morning, probably, or next morning. Wait, when is it for you? Tomorrow morning? Is that when it is for you?
Yes.
Okay. Tomorrow morning for those, and tonight for the people in Australia. So stay tuned. Things are happening, and yeah, I'm not sure how they're happening, but they're happening somehow. And I think we'll drop in back at the news, and we'll keep you apprised of the Trump situation. Whatever we know at the end of the day, but at the moment it's sketchy, and I'm not sure if they're releasing much information. Who knows? But yes, okay, all of that. So I think we just got up to a point where Sousa was like, well, the atheists have got to take responsibility for Stalin and Mao and all these horrible people kind of thing. And I'm not sure that somebody killing in the name of religion and what Stalin and Mao are doing are sort of, really the same thing. I don't think they are. I really don't think they are.
Yeah, replacing religion with the state as a religion, that isn't the same thing as atheism. That's no.
And for those people in the chat saying, oh, it could be a false flag, I don't think Trump is courageous enough to let somebody shoot at him. I really don't think so. You'd have to be, if it was a false flag, you would have to let somebody shoot and hit you in some way.
Yeah,
Which I don't think he's brave enough to do, to be honest with you.
I had rounds with that on somebody in my Discord who, he's like, oh, Trump is absolutely faking this, ketchup packet on the ear, etc. Now he gets all these publicity photos, and he's definitely going to win because of it. Maybe set up, a patsy to take the fall. And I'm like, at least one person is dead. Maybe take off the tinfoil hat for a minute. There were real bullets. Maybe he had like a super sharpshooter that he trusted to just nick his ear, but then how did that super sharpshooter accidentally nail someone in the crowd? It's really... I enjoy a silly conspiracy theory as much as the next person, but this kind of shit, it's exactly the same kind of thing that as skeptics, we're supposed to be stamping out. We're not supposed to be saying, it could be this. You can't prove it isn't this. No, we're supposed to be saying, show me the evidence that it was. Until then, I'm not going to believe the extraordinary claim.
Yeah. And I don't think Trump is courageous enough to let somebody shoot at his head in any capacity. I just don't think so.
I think he would have gone for it in the first election if that were the case.
Is that too loud to anybody? It sounds incredibly loud to me.
I'm not hearing it.
You're not hearing it at all?
Mm-mm.
Oh. Give me 1 sec. I will try doing it again.
We're breaking stuff already, folks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's what we do here.
Absolutely.
Usual time.
There he is.
There he is. I'm trying something different, but I can't change the speed of it with this. Can I? Can I? No, I can't, which is a problem. Okay. Do it the old-fashioned way. Oh, dear.
We do enjoy the old-fashioned. Depending on what one is talking about.
Yeah, tab audio is definitely on. Screen. Can you hear that?
Nah.
What is going on? What is happening here?
StreamYard's being rude.
It's being very rude. It's being incredibly rude. Maybe I can just share my maybe I can just share the actual screen, the entire screen. Yes, I know it's kind of dangerous.
Haha.
You hear that? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to share the entire thing. So I'll just make sure I'm like on streamer mode in Discord and stuff, because that always drives me wild.
Yes.
When somebody, okay.
Mr. Hitchens, you mentioned that having a simultaneous love and fear of someone is no way to teach morals. Now, I don't know about your upbringing, but how do you propose that we teach any self-respecting, say, 2-year-old morals?
2-year-old?
Or should we wait until they develop a good sense of self-respect for themselves to learn morals on their own?
I've actually seen 2-year-olds undergoing some of these dilemmas. In fact, it's an unbelievably vivid memory.
Yeah, I don't think you should have 2-year-olds fear you. I think sort of yeah, I think that I think that sort of they should be confident that you're not going to smite them, maybe. You know, if you're saying that, hey, humans are like a 2-year-old, so it's okay for a god to threaten to torture us, well, I don't think a 2-year-old should be threatened to be tortured. That's just me, though.
Well, as long as you're not torturing the babies for fun, then it's moral. No, I don't understand this perspective. Like either as a god relative to humans or humans as parents relative to their children. Like, first of all, I don't think that you can really teach a 2-year-old morals. Like there's
same.
an intuitive sense of empathy that you can kind of interact with. Like, you don't like it when your brother takes your toys, so don't take his toys, you know? But really getting into morals, no, they're not ready for it. But also, beating the shit out of them to make them obey is not the optimal strategy. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not nice to think that your children must be evil or innately wicked. But there is a point where reason does enter. It's just a bit later than 2. You can't terrify them into doing it. You can sometimes bribe them into doing it by saying Santa Claus knows what they're doing. It has an almost magical effect. But even as you do a thing like that, you feel slightly cheap. In other words, this is going to be a problem for us, whether we are people of faith or not.
Yeah, and you're right that 2 is a bit young to go through the ins and outs of moral judgments, but having them terrified of you is not a way to raise healthy children. But I guess they should trust you to make decisions in their best interests, and sort of terrifying them with threats is probably not going to achieve what you hope it does.
Yeah, that's how you end up with kids who never talk to their parents again once they can leave.
But Christopher, isn't it true that in childhood, all learning is based on piety? And by that I mean, even if you were to teach somebody the law of gravity as a child, you would teach it to them to be received on faith. Later, they would subject it to critical scrutiny.
No, you can teach them to experiment, to say, hey kids, did you know there's this thing called gravity? Watch. That's why things fall down.
Yeah, I really object to his use of the word piety here, to sort of explain to children about this kind of stuff. I don't think that I would describe sort of, giving a child an education in basic concepts of the world around them would be piety, because they experience it already. I don't think that sort of, when the child goes, hey, why do things fall? And you explain gravity is the same as indoctrinating a child with a religious belief kind of thing. I don't know. It's very, very odd.
It is, especially, it's a picked concept. Like if you want to indoctrinate a child into the ways of mathematics, you can show
Right.
them on their actual fingers. If you have
Yeah.
one finger and you add one finger, you now have two fingers. Like you can
Yeah.
demonstrate things to them.
Yeah. And I want to give a big shout out to Doc Dino. Congratulations, Doc. 500 subscribers. You deserve it. You've been doing really good stuff. And yeah, it's fantastic. Doc's having a celebration as well, which we'll probably head to. Well, I'll probably head to if I have the time and it's still running. Yeah, absolutely. I will gate crash. You can't stop me.
A read raid.
Read raid, yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if Doc has. I can redirect to Doc's, but I'll certainly include the link, Doc, if you just drop it in the chat, mate. Oh, and that reminds me, you're definitely one of my mods. I've got to invite you to the server. Oh.
Dare say I'm not going to disagree with you that the observable laws of gravity
So why do you
are not repudiated by any responsible parent.
So notice how Hitch is really good at this. When somebody tries to interrupt him, he just raises like a tiny bit and keeps talking. He doesn't let Dinesh sort of shut him down. He wants to explain what he means. So, he doesn't let that sort of just be cut off. That's really good. Just because somebody tries to interrupt you doesn't mean you have to stop talking. I saw, who did I see it do last? Mr. Anderson do it. They're really good at it. Like when someone tried to interrupt him, he's just sort of, just raises an octave and just keeps going. Because people try to prey on your, so in conversation, there's usually a back and forth. And when someone begins to speak, you go, okay, well, I'll allow you to speak. But, if you haven't been able to articulate what you've got to articulate, they shouldn't be doing that, but they're not paying attention to the social norms either by allowing you to finish. The social norms are you allow somebody to finish and then you speak and then they allow you to speak. It's a give and take. But if they're not going to pay attention to the social norms, I don't see why you have to.
Yeah, there's two things to it, and I'm sure Mr. Anderson will do a formal breakdown at some point, but there's a person who knows you're about to make a good point and tries to interject in order to either throw you off or just steal the mic. We do see this in some debates where, Mark will be about to explain how ERVs prove common descent and then say, redefined living guy will jump in and be like, but Mark, you haven't explained Noah's flood.
Yeah.
Just to try to throw them, that kind of. And then there's also people who just can't wait for their turn to talk. It's not a strategic move. They're just dickheads who cannot wait their turn. In either case, you absolutely should shut them down. Don't keep talking in a way like you're both talking at once and no one can hear anything because it's all crosstalk, which is why a lot of various debaters on the science friend side of things will have certain things like excuse me until the other person stops. But yeah, you can't let them just steamroll over you, whichever one it is they're trying to do.
But perhaps I don't know if either of you have noticed this, but you seem to regard, it's a revealing disclosure, of the role of religion to treat us as if we were infants.
I said that when we are infants.
That was my objection to it in the first place.
Well, not just infants, but also Christianity in particular, and I've said this before, they have a tendency to treat their members like sheep. And I'm not using that in a hyperbolic way. I mean, they literally call it a flock and that, the Lamb of Christ, and they have all these metaphors of the sheep analogies kind of thing. And in fact, Terry Pratchett, who's one of my favorite authors, sort of made a commentary on it in a very sort of roundabout way that sort of says, well, sheep are stupid and have to be driven. If they were if the religion was started by goat herders because goats are intelligent and need to be led, it might be a completely different religion. But the whole point is that, their comparison to sheep is that they need to be shepherded and driven and shown the way to go, kind of thing. They do not trust their members to make moral decisions for themselves, that they have to be guided. And this kind of thing, I think it's kind of, not just children. It's not just comparing them to children, it's comparing them to animals that don't know any better. And I think that's kind of insulting to the human reasoning and human intelligence and human rationality, which is to say, well, we aren't animals technically, but to say, well, you can't decide for yourself, you need a shepherd to guide you. I think is kind of, I think everybody can make decisions morally, and that's where free thinkers come in. Free thinkers believe that you do think for yourself. You can think for yourself. I think it's kind of insulting to say, hey, you people are just sheep, so, just do whatever you're told, kind of thing, which is really the mentality of the church.
Well, as they say, that's a feature, not a bug. It's like that on purpose, because the whole point of the church is to tell you how to live, because you can't possibly figure it out on your own, according to the scriptures and whatnot.
Yeah.
Versus.
I didn't say if we were infants, I said when we are infants. Look, I think there's a deeper point here. The atheists have kind of expected that.
Yeah, but it still applies to Susa, because you're saying that God is doing these things because, we can't understand this stuff. The whole point that he's making is that you're basically saying, well, God's treating us like infants, but he's not, because we don't treat infants that way. I don't know why he doesn't get this. It's sort of, well, I didn't say we were infants. He's just extrapolating upon your analogy. That's all he's doing. Like, why don't you understand that?
Well, that's Dinesh's gotcha move, is find the one thing in what you said that he understands and turn it into a red herring so he doesn't have to address your actual point. But yeah, that's true. With actual children, we try to teach. We don't just say, don't touch the fire is hot. We teach what it means for something to be hot so they know why they shouldn't touch the fire.
Right.
Religion doesn't do that.
Well, we don't say, hey, if you touch that fire, I'm gonna, you're definitely gonna die, kind of thing. And try to put or I'm gonna throw you into a painful place for eternity, kind of thing. That's what we don't do. Forever. Because you have sinned against your father. What you have transgressed against your mother, and so you've got to be taken out the back and tortured. Like, come on, we don't do that with children. That would be abuse. And then it's kind of one of the reasons why I think that the church is abusive. Just look at the amount of people that are petrified of hell. Even people that aren't religious anymore still have this deep fear coming up, and I feel lucky that I never was sort of indoctrinated into that, because holy crap, if I thought that was a real place with I could really go to, I'd be petrified as well over literally nothing. It's abusive and horrible.
Yeah.
As countries become more modern, more technological, religion would wither away. They figured out it's not going to happen. And so they've decided to focus on the schools. And so you find common themes in Dawkins's book, Harris's book, Hitchens' book.
Well, it is kind of withering away. Religiosity is doing a nosedive. I think religiosity is. I'm not sure if But so we've got to separate religion from spiritual beliefs here. Like a lot more people are going for, just spirituality, like the rise of new age spirituality kind of thing. Is still doing huge, as evidenced by Gwyneth Paltrow still making money hand over fist. So I think religiosity is taking a nosedive. I'm not sure about spirituality in general, but definitely religions are, and for good reason too.
Why do parents have the right to inculcate religious values in the young? Shouldn't that be something that is taken over by the schools and done, you may say, in an atheist way? Or at least the schools are seen as deprogramming the religious beliefs that parents inculcate into children. I think that this is a little worrisome in a free society. The desire to detach children from the moral training of their parents, to turn it over to experts like Dawkins and Hitchens, whom I think you can see are not merely following the evidence where it leads, but have a certain visceral dislike, have themselves an agenda no less fierce than that of any Christian parent.
Wow. The projection.
Wow.
The projection.
Oh, well, he's trying to say, it's a tu quo que. I don't know if you want to do your graphic, but it is a tu quo que. It's saying, hey, you guys have an agenda, like, we have an agenda, but so do you. Well, congratulations to Sousa. You've just admitted that you've got an agenda. But it depends, like, when people say, oh, you have an agenda, so let's get this straight. Having an agenda is not a bad thing, right? If you have an agenda to get lead out of water, for instance, is that the horrible thing that you're trying to make it out? It is by saying, well, they have an agenda. No, that's perfectly reasonable. Having an agenda, like when people talk about like, oh, they have an agenda, usually it is a political agenda, something that they want to implement society-wide kind of thing. It's something that they want to change society into. And I'm not sure that Dawkins and Hitch have that agenda of destroying religion like D'Souza is trying to imply. I think their agenda is to get religion's agenda out of the mainstream, implemented upon people that do not want it. I think that is what they want. So that isn't really a political agenda. I mean, I guess it is sort of, but, it's not sort of saying, hey, you have an agenda is not the flex that D'Souza thinks it is here. It really depends what your agenda is. If your agenda is, the health of all, make children survive longer and live longer, nobody's going to say that's evil, but it's still an agenda. So I think this word is overused and underexplained.
Yeah, it's loaded language. It's used for rhetorical purposes rather than informational purposes.
Like so when D'Souza's saying it, he's saying, well, they've got an agenda to make a country atheist, like we've got an agenda to make the country Christian, and I don't think that's the case. I don't think that Dawkins or Hitchens wants to stamp out Christianity like he's sort of saying. I think they want Christianity to leave people alone to make their own decisions. I think that's what they've always said. I mean, even I think Dawkins recently said that sort of, culturally Christianity's fine kind of thing. I think the religious people were crowing about it at one point.
He did, but in like the most problematic way possible. He basically came on national TV and said, well, I consider myself, while not a believer, I'm culturally Christian, and I'm relying on the churches and the MPs who are good Christians and whatnot to protect me from the scary brown people.
Yeah, he's got a real problem with Islam, which is understandable, but sort of saying that Christianity is sort of you're culturally. What does that even mean? You're culturally Christian. It's kind of a category error. That because Christianity is a religious view, so it's not it's not a cultural view. I kind of get what he's trying to get at, but I think it's been said in the most clumsy and weird way possible. Our culture is a result of a lot of different things, right? It's not a result of Christianity. It's not a result of colonialism. It's not a result of postmodernism. It's not a result of any one thing together. Our culture is a massive cauldron of bubbling ideologies that have all intertwined and come out with this very dense fabric. It's not, maybe I'm mixing metaphors here, but it's not just, hey, this came from, like, our culture we've got to look at as being influenced by all kinds of things. Like, so you've got the hippie revolution of the 60s and 70s, and the founding fathers and the Civil War of the Dais. You've got the all kinds of different things. And yes, bad stuff as well. Colonialism is in there, making part of the culture racist and horrible. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If Christianity really were the key to culture, if a culture was Christian before it was anything else, then every Christian nation would have the same culture. And they don't.
So when we're talking about culture, you cannot just say, hey, our culture is X. Our culture is our culture. There are a lot of different things impacting it. And cultures grow differently depending on the events. I think that Canada has a very different, and Australia have a very different colonial origin, coming from peaceful moving away from the aristocracy rather than violence. Like America was born from the violent revolution and justified violent revolution, but there it is. And so it has a different culture to it. So I don't think you can sort of go, oh, well, I'm a cultural Christian, because our culture isn't Christian. It's certainly influenced by Christianity, but it's also influenced by everything back to the ancient Greek times and democracy. So, and the Enlightenment had a huge impact on our culture. Hell, music has had a huge impact on our culture, and that
the golden age of Islam.
Right, absolutely. Tons of things have, like, so I think that's, I like Western culture and I dislike that to start with. I think, that we're a Christian culture is even worse. I think that's awful. I don't think that deserved a hoot nor holler, but I'm not religious, so there you go.
You're just biased.
This is a question for Mr. D'Souza. It's a statement you made earlier that the laws of nature reflect the goings-on in our head. I'd love to hear you elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, justify that one. Is he an idealist? I'm not sure if he's so. An idealist, as opposed to an empiricist, kind of an idealist thinks that the only way you can get to knowledge is through your own mind, kind of thing. Like, sort of, your mind is the end thing of knowledge, and I don't think that's the case. I'm with the empiricists that think that anything to be real or true, you have to observe it in the physical world, like through your senses, essentially, and that's what empiricism is. Whereas idealists would say, no, things can be true without being justified by the senses. You can have knowledge of things without your senses. I don't know how that works. I think that everyone's an empiricist when it's important. So if you want to soundbite that's fine. I gotcha. But Mark Reed says everything important, suddenly you become an empiricist. Like, if you've got to cross the street, suddenly you're an empiricist. If you've got to check to see whether your phone is missing or not, suddenly you're an empiricist. Your ideals and your ideas and your concepts suddenly have nothing to do with it. So this is a really good question. I mean, how does your mind affect the laws of nature? It doesn't. It so doesn't. I don't know how ontologically that can be true. I really don't.
The point I was getting at is this. When I said earlier that the laws of nature, the universe is lawful, we only have to go to other cultures to see how odd that is. The Muslim writer Al-Ghazali says, how can the universe obey, how can matter obey laws?
They're not, no, you're not talking about laws like human laws. What?
We're going to arrest all the atoms who do not obey.
So the laws of nature that we identify, right? So we have the law of gravity or the law of this or law of that. They're descriptive. They're descriptive of how the universe operates. I think he's confusing, say, the law of you have a law in science with a human-made law. So in science, when we say this is a law, we're describing a property of the universe or a property of reality or a property out there in nature. We're describing something. Laws, as far as humans are concerned, are prescriptive. We make them up in order to tell people what to do. We say, hey, you've got to do this, or else transgressing that law will have some sort of punishment attached, right? That, the law of universal attraction, it doesn't have that prescription. It is just a description of how everything operates. That law is not violated because it cannot be violated. It's a law. Okay. Oh, wow. Left-handed Jedi. Thank you so much. We have got a Jedi. Return of the Jedi.
Hell yeah.
Give 5 mark readerships. We have Binge Thinker, Katina Packbear, Sydney, Raptor, Michael Bell, and Tilting Windmill. Thank you so much. Enjoy your emotes. Winners, chicken dinners all round. Thank you so much, Jedi. I really appreciate it. Maybe I'm waking up. That was way more energy than I intended to do that with, to be honest with you. But, there you go.
Yeah,
Thank
I was going to say,
much.
you're getting better at that announcer thing.
Why not? Why not? Let's do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because it's my morning. I feel fired up. Okay, I'll have the energy for both of us here. But absolutely awesome. Thank you.
Says the universe is a reflection in the mind of Allah. Everything happens because Allah intervenes every single nanosecond to make it happen. And that's
that is such a sort of begging the question kind of thing. So basically you're saying, well, why do these laws exist? Why are there constraints upon the universe? And it's a good question. Why is there constraints on the universe? Why is conservation of momentum a thing? But to sort of say, hey, that Allah intervenes in every single, nanosecond to make sure that the energy is maintained when you push it. You're going to have to show that's the case, not just assert it.
It's a lot of extra pre-sup energy going on there.
Yeah, it is kind of pre-suppy. It's really his argument is, and here's his argument: laws require a lawgiver. That's his argument.
Yeah, he's bending in that direction, and sadly it's not just the smooth brains like Dinesh, but like, William Lane Craig does this, Frank Turek does this. All these apologists, I don't know if they're necessarily equivocating or they just don't understand what they're talking about, but they cannot seem to understand that laws in the scientific sense are descriptive. I know they've had it explained to them over and over, but they're just not getting it.
Yeah. And sort of, so they're two different definitions of laws is what I'm getting at. Like we have these definitions in science that isn't the same as in sort of colloquial or even political or legislative conversation. They just take any word with another word to mean exactly the same thing. Like they can't have any other definition. it's like nothing that Krauss used to describe sort of a quantum state of sort of low entry. Like, they just take it as exactly the same as the philosophical concept.
Yeah, homonyms are the same thing.
Yeah.
And it shows either stupidity or intellectual dishonesty. They get to pick.
Sometimes I pick for them, Amber. Sometimes I...
That's fair.
It's not the belief of Christianity. Now, if you imagine that in our heads are atoms and molecules and neurons firing away, I ask you, what logical necessity is there for the workings of these neurons in here to match the laws of the universe out there?
I'm sorry, what logical necessity is it for the workings of the neurons in your brain to match the physical law? There is no necessity.
Like, why,
the laws,
why would they be exempt?
Yeah, I don't like the models that we make are usually imprecise. Well, they're always imprecise. We can never precisely define the physical properties of the universe because it's always a model that is as close to as possible. So he's making the assumption that the models that we have about the laws of the universe are exact and not sort of approximations to a certain degree of accuracy that we can attempt. So that's his first mistake. Second mistake is, why do you think it's necessary? I don't understand. I'm so confused by this argument.
That's the thing I've noticed with a lot of people who believe on this level, where they aren't just saying it's just what I believe and shrug. They feel the need to dig in and try to justify. There's always weird, idiosyncratic, unique ideology underneath it that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's not reason, it's justification. Right.
And that's sort of, as I've said, that's opposite to the way we do science, which is sort of observe and then make hypothesis and get conclusions from that. It's kind of having the conclusion and attempting to justify that conclusion any way you can. And this sort of shows the kind of mental gymnastics that Dinesh sort of gets into. It's baffling. Like, I could think that the gravity isn't real. Lots of flat earthers think that gravity isn't real and doesn't work the way that it works. That their mental image is not accurate to anything in nature.
So clearly, their neurons aren't firing.
Why should there be a correspondence between the two? Again, as a theist, I have an answer.
Sometimes there's not. As a theist, you have an answer. That some people are accurate and some people aren't. I don't understand this. I really don't. Is he trying to say why our senses describe reality? Because they don't do it that well. They're fooled all the time, constantly.
So, I was driving with my kids earlier today, and my youngest was pointing out that her fingers are like long and bend in weird ways, and it made me think of his noodly goodness, the flying spaghetti monster. And I said, see, you, because you have noodly appendages, would have a high place in this church. You may consider it for the future. And it occurred to me that my youngest presenting with noodly appendages is, to some extent, potential evidence for the existence of the flying spaghetti monster, which is considerably more evidence than we've seen for anything Dinesh has proposed. So if we're just going to drop the bar, our evidentiary standard, our epistemological standard, to the floor, like William Lane Craig suggests, then yes, Dinesh could clear that. But other things could clear it better. So we need a bar somewhere where it will block something like a person having noodle fingers from proving the existence
Right.
of a deity that was made up just to make fun of creationism.
Yeah. But as William Lane Craig says, if you can't clear that bar, which is weird.
As an atheist, he has a guess. And in fact, he's been hanging an awful lot on that guess tonight.
You have a guess too, Dinesh. Saying you have an answer doesn't mean it really is an answer. You have to
Right.
demonstrate that it is. Until you
Right.
do, it is a guess.
I'm just wondering what Hitchens' guess is of why your inner mind, your mind represents the reality around you. But you're sort of saying, hey, why is it so accurate? And it's not. Our eyes get fooled all the time. That's why optical illusions exist.
Why
Our
Penn
ears
and
get
Teller have
fooled all the
jobs.
time. Right. All we can say is that our senses represent reality for a certain level of accuracy, depending on the circumstances. And they can be very easily fooled, but we're aware of this. Like, this isn't something that people are unaware of. It's why we don't just go out and eyeball a distance. We have tools in order to make sure that our senses are evaluating them correctly. Basically, tools are not just things for enhancing our physical abilities, but also tools for enhancing our senses and how we measure, how we get to conclusions. This is weird. This is so weird.
Defending this or that miracle. But I'm simply saying that we have a very limited understanding of
You haven't
nature's
defended any
laws.
miracles, as a matter of fact.
I'm sorry?
You haven't defended any miracles, as a matter of fact.
Well, in my book, as you know, I defend one, the resurrection. I lay out the evidence for it in a very much...
Oh, you defend the one that nobody was there.
I would love to hear the evidence for that one, but that's not tonight's debate topic. Is Christianity the problem?
Yeah.
Very much in an historical way.
Yeah, I think he got into it briefly, that there was evidence for it, but he didn't really go into it. But the question is sort of, is there a bunch of people out there running around thinking that sort of God found their car keys or saved them from certain things? I think that is the case, but he hasn't attempted to defend any of the miracle claims that he's made throughout his career. I don't think he will. I think he just takes it on faith.
But that was my point, that there's a strange correspondence here that ultimately relies on faith. And the only difference ultimately with the atheist is he relies on the evidence while denying the metaphysical ground on which it stands. Isn't that?
I'm sorry, evidence has a metaphysical grounding. Like, metaphysical doesn't mean... Okay, so when people start this, it's really weird, because metaphysical doesn't mean spiritual or not natural or anything like it. Metaphysical refers to can refer to concepts. It can, like, I can have if I say that Superman can fly, that is metaphysically true, right? So metaphysics isn't just sort of, well, that means it must be a God concept. No, that's not what we mean. Metaphysical just means things that are outside. So if I say I love my wife, that's kind of metaphysical, right? There is a physical component, but there's something about it that isn't part of the physical world. So concepts, abstractions. Sorry?
Truth itself.
Right, proof itself, right. So there's a metaphysical component. And sure, some of the components are physical, but when we talk metaphysical, we're not automatically saying, hey, but some theists take it as, well, if there's metaphysical things, it must mean there's supernatural things. No, that's not what metaphysical means. That is not what it means.
I ran into trouble with that in seminary. There was a metaphysics program where they were like, okay, so metaphysics is like the reality behind reality, and like this is basically where God lives and how God works and etc. And I'm like, that's not what that means, though. Have you read
No.
Aristotle?
Yeah.
True.
Metaphysical drama is a bit strong, I think. It's whole cloth fabrication.
Isn't science based on metaphysical assumptions?
I still think you misrepresented David.
Yep, there it was again. Like Dinesh tried to interrupt, and he's just no, because he knows that in the long run, if Dinesh keeps trying to talk over him, he's going to look terrible. He looks weak. He looks like he can't allow Hitchens to continue. So he knows that Dinesh is going to shut up because either way he wins. He either gets to keep on talking, which is what he wants, or Dinesh looks like an absolute ass, which works for him as well. So, you know, I guess if I'm giving advice for debate, it's don't worry about too much about your opponent being an ass. If your opponent wants to be like a complete jerk, that's actually good for you, because you know all you can do is carry yourself with some kind of decorum, or carry yourself as much as you can to having a good faith conversation, and trust that the audience is going to see the opposition for what they are if they are being an ass. Sure, there's people that will sort of, you know, carry on regardless, but I think people generally do want good faith conversations. They don't want, you know, just shouting matches. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's why I don't get asked to debates. I don't know.
I think people are scared.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I say that, but I don't think so. I just, you know, I can be a bit of a pain and stuff. I don't know. I've got no idea, but
Something apparently involving suspension of the laws of nature, shall we say, the sun standing still so Joshua can win his battle, all right? Or the raising of Jairus' daughter, or...
Oh, no, the Joshua one is fantastic. The Joshua one is fantastic. Like, that is, he should just focus on that one. So that's basically where the sun stood still in the sky so that the Israelites would have enough time to fight, kind of thing. And yeah, to sort of tribal people, that's amazing and that's cool and that's awesome and how great is my God. To us modern people, it's like, I'm sorry that the Earth stopped rotating. Like, how would that work?
Well, magic, of course.
Well, yeah.
You just need to use your imagination.
Even my favorite miracle, the turning of the water into wine at Cana. A tribute to the Hellenistic influence that still persisted in Palestine at that time. You still have to ask yourself the question, which is more probable, that the laws of physics or nature have been suspended, by the way, in my favor, or that I'm under a misapprehension? Everyone has to ask themselves that question. That's if they saw it themselves. If they take it as a report issued through and filtered through dozens of other non-eyewitnesses and corrupt texts down the years, then I would think anyone who says that they think of the resurrection as a historic fact is advertising a willingness to believe in absolutely anything.
Let's have another question.
Yeah, I get what he's saying. Like, and this whole idea that there were, you know, 500 witnesses and stuff. There's not 500 witnesses. There's one book saying there's 500 witnesses. That's not a thing. And plus, like, I've seen magicians turn water into wine. It's a good
That's
trick,
a magic trick I did myself when I was like 8.
Yeah.
This question is for Mr. Christopher Hitchens. You've said in past debates, and I refer to the debate between you and Doug Wilson, that morality has merely evolved. And I say merely because I think we'd all agree, Christian and atheist alike, that morality has evolved anthropologically speaking. But I want to know, if it's merely evolved, why can't I transcend the current state of evolved morality, what standard can you appeal to?
I'm not sure if Hitchens is really like the thing usually isn't philosophy so much as theology. I totally understand that. So the question he's saying is, well, we know that morality has evolved throughout the years. That is evident. That is 100% evident. I don't know how you would argue against that. And that's why it always confuses me when people say, hey, we've got absolute morality, because absolute morality can and will never change. It's even one step higher than objective. Absolute morality is unchanging, which we know it has changed, or it appears to have changed.
Yeah.
If you want to retroact,
how do you feel about slavery?
Yeah.
Clearly, things have changed.
Sure. And there's no problem with that. I did a debate against, I can't remember, it was over on Debate Cafe, and I had to explain to somebody that absolute morality meant complete unchangingness, like it is set today, tomorrow, kind of thing. So at least he acknowledges that it has evolved, but I'm not sure why he said, oh, we can transcend morality. Why can't I transcend morality? So, I mean, you can. That's what a moral anti-realist thinks. They don't think that morality is a set of facts. They think that morality is sort of what we agree on is good and bad, sort of over, culturally and for ourselves. I don't know why, what is to stop someone transgressing that morality? Well, they do. Prisons are full of them.
It sounds to me like a malformed question. What he's getting at is like, if morality does evolve, why can't we do better than the morality of our times? But of course we can, because in the morality of our times, prisons with solitary confinement are completely acceptable, whereas we can appeal to standards beyond the cultural ethic. What are we actually hoping to achieve? What is the purpose of our morals? To increase flourishing, to minimize suffering, to reduce needless suffering. And so we can say, are these prisons really doing what they're supposed to be doing, or are they just causing suffering? So we can appeal beyond the ethics of our eras by appealing to the point of morality in the first place.
Yeah, so I don't, I'm not sure, but I don't know. I didn't get that. I sort of thought he was asking like, why is morality real if we can just transcend it, kind of thing? Like, why can't we just, anyway, maybe let's hear him out and see what he.
Well, look, evolved morality is because we're an evolved species, and because of our evolution, the lowly stamp of which, as Darwin so beautifully puts it, we bear. The fact that we are primates, an unarguable fact. Our prefrontal lobes are slightly too small. Our adrenal gland, though there's evidence that they're still evolving, which is, I think, heartening. You may have to be patient. It won't come in time for Tom Tancredo, but it is coming. And our adrenaline glands are too big. They produce more adrenaline than we need. And there are all kinds of other problems with our whole bearing and nature. Some people like to call this original sin. It's certainly true we have some innate inbuilt design flaws. There isn't going to be any supernatural solution to this, and nor can it be supernaturally commanded to go away. As Fulk Greville says, you can't create people sick and then order them to be well. And that's what religion does. And because it makes it.
Well, it claims they were created sick. I don't think it creates people sick. It basically just tells them they were created sick, which is horrible. And the whole idea that we have flaws in our, especially when it comes to, and I want to really outline this, especially when it comes to emotional reasoning. A lot of the things that are sort of immoral are caused by sort of emotional reasoning that we do. And we all do it. This is the thing, like we all go, well, I'm going to do this, and it's coming from a place of fear, or it's coming from a place of anger, or it's coming from a place of, optimism, needless optimism, or, sort of you're happy about somebody, so you don't sort of objectively look at them. Like all of these things are emotional reasoning, and we kind of have these flaws about our emotions in us. I think that emotional reasoning is very useful in some situations, but it's not particularly accurate. It's not particularly good at getting you to a good conclusion. So I get what he's saying. We still have the stamp of our evolution on us with this sort of the way that we base our decisions based upon our emotions, essentially. I think some of that is for the best. Like pro-social behaviors seem to stem from the sort of emotional empathy and reciprocity that people have, these senses of belonging that people have. So I don't think it's a bad thing, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I completely agree. Like when we drill down to, like, we say, okay, improving flourishing and reducing suffering is a good thing. Well, what makes that a good thing? Ultimately, it comes to our own emotions. Like we want a world that is a happier place, that's nicer to live in, where we will suffer less. It's emotional at its root.
No, that's true. Yeah. But I think that emotion of how we get there. So yeah, absolutely. That meta ethical aim, that framework that we've got to say, hey, we want to improve well-being and this well-being of society. So our well-being is improved and we are generally happier in our lives. I think that certainly is based upon emotion, but I don't think the decisions that we make should be, because they are not that reliable for telling you how to get there. You know, like you might think, oh, well, that person, I'd be happy if that person, well, for instance, like take Trump, right? If that person was shot, kind of thing. That might not be the case. That might not be the best way to get you towards a better society. This is why I do condemn all political violence, because it leads to more violence. Like, while you may think emotionally that taking out someone is the best way to get to your goal, it's not. It's not. It's just not. Oh, I totally agree with that. Religion is society's appendix, yeah. Except the appendix probably has a slight use that we sort of know about.
Impossible demands on people and insists they believe in possible things and obey laws that cannot actually be followed, that I accuse it of totalitarianism, the essence of which is the combination of authority with caprice.
Evolution, although a powerful theory in many respects, doesn't account for three things.
So he's an evolution denier as well. Oh, Dinesh,
awesome.
What the hell? He's ticking all the boxes here. A powerful theory. What exactly is a powerful theory? Could you give me a definition for how we rate the power of a theory?
I mean, I've heard theories described as powerful when they make a lot of predictions that are relatively easy to confirm. Recently, Grayson from Base Theory did a debate involving the prediction of the CMB power spectrum. That's a powerful theory because it provided a fuck ton of data points and nailed most of them dead on.
That was against T-Rock. That was a really good debate, by the way. Just going to mention that. Yeah, absolutely. But when you say it's like saying, well, gravity is a powerful theory, but it doesn't explain the three-body problem. What are you talking about?
Well, therefore, there is no gravity, and it's Jesus particles pushing us all to the ground.
Jesus obviously intercedes every nanosecond to make sure the laws of nature are being followed. So it's basically every time you're sticking to the earth, it's Jesus with a whip cracking it so that you don't fly off. Don't you know?
That is sort of the point of the three-body problem, is that if there are laws of nature, it's only by the assent or the willingness or the refusal to intervene on the part of a much more powerful entity. Because
Okay.
even if there were a consistency in the laws of nature as the default position, there is, in a near infinite universe, almost definitely something more advanced than us, advanced enough to the point that their technological powers look like magic and miracles to us.
Mm-hmm.
And they could choose to fuck with how we perceive the nature.
Right.
So them
So you're
not
talking
doing
about the
that.
you're talking about the book now, aren't you?
Yes, I'm not familiar with the show.
Okay. Well, I was talking about the actual three-body problem of physics.
Right.
Yeah.
There is a relationship between the two, but yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't account for the origin of life, which is presumed.
No, it doesn't count that. That's why would it?
Yeah, there is life, so we don't have to prove that life arose.
Right.
It's already here.
Yeah.
We can bracket that problem and set it aside because that's nothing to do with the explanation for the diversity of life that we actually observe.
Yeah, and sort of, so the origin of life is a problem within science, but it's not a problem within evolution because it's not meant to address that problem. It's meant to address biodiversity. That's all. It's like saying, oh, the theory of gravity doesn't address the problems parachutists have, stuffing. It's not designed to do that. I don't.
It doesn't account for the origin of consciousness, for which Steven Pinker says there is no explanation.
It does.
It
kind
doesn't.
of does.
Did you know that the theory of evolution doesn't account for the speed of light, Mark? I mean, how can we trust
No.
evolution when it doesn't
Right.
even mention the speed of light?
Right. But the things that he's talking about, like the problem of consciousness, why are we conscious at all, is more a philosophical problem than it is a scientific one. The whole thing is that consciousness would not have arisen if there wasn't some advantage to it. And I think that conscious beings do have a large advantage, as evidenced by conscious beings sort of being very successful in their niches. So it doesn't have to say exactly why we're conscious, like what series of events led to that. It just has to say, hey, there was an advantage to being conscious. And I think there is. I think that the organisms that are conscious are ones that needed problem-solving ability, because problem-solving ability and the ability to think in a way that is intelligent comes alongside that. Being able to solve these problems comes alongside that. So it's very strange for him to say that when people go, oh, well, you can't explain why intelligence is there. And it's like, don't you think intelligence would be a very advantageous property in some animals? Like, don't you think that's the case? I would imagine so. Like, if you were, don't you think a squid or an octopus would be a lot less successful if they were dumb as a starfish? The ability to ambush their predators, to outthink their predator, to sort of unscrew jars and hide in them, kind of thing. Like, that seems like a huge advantage. But, they don't understand that survival strategies aren't necessarily about what we have. Like, oh, well, it's advantageous to be intelligent. It's not. Sometimes it's not.
Yeah, it's very expensive energy-wise.
Right. But sometimes it is. It depends what pressures. And generally what will happen is there'll be a wide variety of survival strategies, and some of them will work. And not all the same things will work. Like starfish basically have no brain and they're basically just reacting to everything. But they propagate very fast and a lot and can regenerate, which is pretty damn cool. But their strategy isn't being that conscious, aware thing like an octopus. Their strategy is very fast rates of breeding and regeneration and some other cool mechanisms, that sort of help them.
It doesn't account for morality. Now, the evolutionists have been trying very...
So I don't know what he means by account for morality, because you can point to empathy being one of the, you can point to certain pro-social behaviors as opposed to anti-social behaviors being incredibly advantageous. So it can kind of account for morality. So I don't see a problem with that. Like saying, hey, morality is sort of being pro-social, being able to work with others. Working with others is an advantageous thing. So whenever somebody says, hey, shouldn't we all be fighting against one another, and shouldn't animals all be killing one another because of evolution, because it's whoever is strongest wins, or whoever is the fittest wins, or whoever survives wins, right? One of these things. And they don't understand evolution. They don't understand it, because it's not about you specifically surviving. It's about your species, your lineage surviving. So pro-social behaviors are those that there is advantage in a whole bunch of animals working together. That's why we get groups of animals. That's why we get flocks of birds, because there is an advantage to them all working together. That's what pro-social behaviors are. So it kind of does.
Hard to do it. And they look at morality as a form of extended selfishness. If a mom jumps into a car to save a kid, it's because they share the same genes. That accounts for about 1% of morality. But what about the morality that has no genetic benefit? I get up to offer an old lady a seat in a bus.
That has a genetic benefit. You're both human. You're both still human. You both share a genetic similarity. So we care for our close family more than we do our extended family. We care for an extended family more than we do, strangers in our country. We care for strangers in our country more than we do for those outside of our country. But all humans share a common DNA. And I guess what I'm trying to get across to people is that the more that we band together, like outside of our groups, like, we used to be tribal and we only took care of our close and extended family. That was it. It's been so much more successful being a country, a nation of people that are sort of related in a certain way, but not even family kind of thing. And I think that our survival chances go up when, say, we're part of a union that is a union of countries kind of thing, alliances. We're so much stronger. We would be probably the strongest we could be if we worked as one planet or one species. Yeah. So Dinesh is wrong. There is advantage to helping somebody that means nothing to you just because they're another human. There is advantage in that.
Mm-hmm.
And not just for selfish reasons that, hey, that old lady might help you, or somebody may help you in a similar situation. If you're old and you need to cross the road, don't you want to live in a society where someone will help you? If you do, then you ought to help other people. It's not rocket science.
I don't do it because tomorrow I hope I'll get her seat, or she'll do the same for me. I give blood. Even Richard Dawkins says there's no evolutionary explanation for that. Give me...
For fuck's sake. So Christians love to tell stories about things that never happened and use them as anecdotal evidence for why. And often it's emulation of Jesus with his parables and shit. We have heard so many times for nearly 100 years now. There was this man who gave blood every 2 weeks or whatever the fuck the limit is. Like, he did it religiously until one day someone said, "Sir, why do you do that? It's no benefit to you." And he went, "My goodness, you're right. I never realized." And he stopped giving blood. And that very night, his teenage son was in a car crash. And that child died because the hospital didn't have 1 pint of A negative. And the father was A negative. He killed his own son by not giving blood. I mean, we don't even have to reach very far to explain why there's a benefit to doing that one.
Yeah, I'm just going through. I don't think Dawkins said that. Like, a lot of the time, Dawkins will say, hey, there's no apparent benefit in this or no apparent benefit of that. But he's sort of saying at surface level. I don't, like, I'm just going through wiki quotes. He didn't, like, there's nothing in it about that. I don't think Dawkins said that or intimated that. I can't find this anywhere. I would like to have a citation from D'Souza about this, because D'Souza has been shown to be very shifty when it comes to quoting people, out of context or misreading what they've said or just outright lying about what they've said. I'm sorry, I'm going to call it. D'Souza is not somebody I would trust with, hey, Dawkins says this. Well, I'd like to hear that from Dawkins. I don't see why there wouldn't be an evolutionary benefit to sharing plasma. I really don't know why that would be.
Liberty or give me death, the man who helped the Good Samaritan. When we do...
What? Give me...
You're just throwing out all kinds of random shit.
Give me liberty or give me death? That wasn't about help, like being a good Samaritan. What are you talking about?
Maybe Patrick Henry was a good Samaritan? I don't know.
I don't know.
Agape, charity, with no hope of return. There is no evolutionary explanation at all. Now,
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. I think that's 100% a lie. I don't think that's true at all. I think that many animals share that kind of selfless behavior when there's no chance of them benefiting from it. I think we see that all the time.
Wait, which thing?
You okay, Ember? You're shuddering a bit.
Oh, I was hearing some shudders too. My computer's multitasking.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Whee!
Okay, you seem to be back. Let's call you back.
I've been saved, or something.
Sorry for Ember's slight rapture there.
I want to suggest that this is pointing us to a much deeper truth, and that is this. It is true that we are animals in the sense that we too, like animals and like non-living things, obey the laws of nature. But I want to suggest that the very fact that we have morality, which depends on free will, means that there is a dimension of...
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think... So the question that I've been thinking about is, does morality actually depend on free will? We can sort of say how, like, morality is just how someone ought to behave, the code of conduct that people ought to adhere to. I can apply that to, say, my computer. There's a code of conduct that my computer ought to do, and there's no free will in my computer, right? But the fact that I can sort of say, hey, the computer's completely deterministic, but there's some, there is an optimum running of it. It makes it more, morality applies more than not. So I don't see why you need free will in order to get orcs.
Yeah, I dare say you would need something close enough to free will for government's purposes. in order to not have morality, in order to opt out of doing what you ought to do, especially when you know better. That requires a choice. But following your obligations, whether they be honor or cultural or whatever, you don't need free will for that. You could just program yourself with the expectations of the society you live in and run on autopilot.
Well, I think that you could make the argument, and I don't subscribe to this argument, so I really am steel manning it, that if evolution has these evolutionary pressures and there is sort of an optimal way to survive in a very hostile universe, then that is the moral thing to do. Now, because of flaws in the system, just say there's a flaw in my computer's system, that it does not run in the optimal way, just like humans aren't running in the optimal way, I can say that that flaw has caused the system to run immorally, basically. It's not doing what it ought to do. So I don't think you either need free will to run a computer in an optimal way or not. I think that you can get to morality without free will at all. I think you can sort of say, hey, because of this flaw that has occurred deterministically, that is a flaw in the system, and that is the system being immoral. I mean, well, I'd never apply morality or immorality to a physical thing, like something that isn't a human, but that's a way you could think of it. Because it is just ought. So just say somebody has, say, sociopathic homicidal tendencies, for instance. You could say that, hey, that is immoral because they are not functioning in the way a human ought to function as part of evolutionary process and societal evolutionary process. But I don't think that's the case. I'm not a subscriber to that. I don't think there is an objective morality. I think it's constructed by us. So I'm not a subscriber. But I'm just pointing out that Dinesh has not qualified that morality needs free will at all in any way. He hasn't qualified that in the slightest. And in fact, if things are deterministic, determined by previous process, like the hard determinists think, then morality exists even more, because then you've got a objective morality, and any non-adherence to that, how something ought to proceed, is a violation of morality. So Dinesh is not. No, he's not. He's not qualified that in any way, shape, or form. Oh God, that is frightening. That is really frightening, Charioteer. That is scary. Lightning? Yeah. Yeah, like you'll probably make him sort of communications officer or something, which is just horrifying.
Us that exists, one may say, transcending the laws of nature. Here's why. A stone doesn't have a choice of whether to roll down the hill. It can't say stop. It merely follows the law. On the other hand, in small decisions and big, I have choice. Here's the pen. I have a free choice to drop it or not. If I drop it, it will follow exactly the laws of gravity. But my decision to drop it is purely a free choice.
Is it? I want to steelman the determinist here, that choice of you using your pen may have been caused by other factors. You may like pens, and which was caused by, in your childhood, you picked up a pen and it felt, like you can always say that was deterministic. I think determinism is one of those unfalsifiable things, but so is free will, because you can always point to priors regarding any decision at all. If I decide to throw out my coffee, it might be because a number of factors that led up to that. You cannot say, well, this has to be free will because I could choose to drop my pen or not. Is it? Because if you have a history of breaking pens, for instance, you may not decide not to drop your pen, and it may be all decided by priors. But I think it's unfalsifiable because there's no counterexample, you could say prayers for any action you choose to take, which is why I'm really on the fence about free will. I don't know if we have free will or not. I don't know. And apparently I'm saying that freely.
Yep. You have to have free will. You have no choice.
right, which is a very famous Hitchens quote. I'm not sure if he says it in this one, but
yeah. I don't know.
Undetermined by the laws of physics. I can go either way. And every moral choice is of that nature. Our entire vocabulary.
Is it undetermined by the laws of physics? Because we get into this, that yes, it seems like it, but it seems to be you know, your neurons firing and things like that. If you have some sort of brain damage or stroke and suddenly you can't control your hands, you might be dropping that pen against your will.
Yeah, that's a possibility too.
Like just let's say a certain disorder arises where you have to drop pens. You're compelled to. You have obsessive compulsive for dropping pens. How does that work? I don't know. It's a bit of a ridiculous hypothetical, though, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. But I think that's sort of the point. Like, just like determinism exists to show that free will isn't a given, like mythicism exists to show that Jesus being a historical figure isn't a given. It's a position that has to be defended. It's sort of the same thing. Like, Dinesh is just wildly waving at his ability to make choices as proof of free will to distract from the actual subject. Like, he was on about evolution, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think he's going to these places because he kind of knows that it's not where Hitchens feels comfortable. He's comfortable in theology, sort of sociology, anthropology, these more sort of modern ideas and modern things. He's going to philosophy and evolution, because I think he knows that they're not Hitchens' strong areas.
Of thou shalt not, and don't do this, and you shouldn't have done that, would have to be wiped out. If it was merely an you wouldn't have to teach anyone right and wrong. It would be genetically programmed into them. So
No, that's like saying, hey, my computer would just know how to operate because it's been designed to do that. And well, yeah, but that doesn't mean it does actually do that in the real world. Flaws enter the system.
Idea that we are already moral by evolution? It's nonsense. Morality ultimately does have to be inculcated.
Well, hold on. This sword cuts both ways, and in fact, it works more strongly against Dinesh.
Correct.
If he were correct and morality were inherently inscribed by some divine being, then every human would have the same morality, and you also wouldn't have to teach 2-year-olds.
That was that is the argument from moral diversity. It's sort of saying, hey, that morals are not instilled in us because of the sheer diversity of morals that come out with, across different civilizations. And they can sort of say, oh, well, all of them kind of have the same. And it's like, no, they don't. Like, you look at the Aztec civilization, sacrificing people en masse, like, that is a different morality than what we would see out of, say, a progressive modern society.
Next question, please.
Yeah, well, I think, I'm sorry, if with your leave, that demands a little correction. First, just take the Good Samaritan. Since he was already known of by Jesus of Nazareth, assuming he ever existed, the man from Samaria, his good behavior can't be attributed to Christian teaching, can it, by definition? And if you recall, all the people who behaved worse.
That's a very good point. You're trying to claim the Good Samaritan, but the Good Samaritan, like, Christianity couldn't have been around for the Good Samaritan to know about or be raised in. So his behavior must have come from somewhere else, because it couldn't have come from Jesus.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a parable. It's a story that probably isn't even true, designed to teach something. And a lot of the Bible is like that. It's these stories that are designed to teach something rather than actual events that occurred. Like the Old Testament, where the guy picks up sticks and is ripped to death or the children are ripped to death because they laugh at him. No, what was it? It was the bald guy. They laugh at a bald guy, and then God sends she-bears to kill them. That isn't a story that actually happened. It's just hey, children, don't mock the elderly, or else you're in bloody trouble. It's just parables and these stories. They're almost like Grimm's fairy tales, Aesop's fables. They're fables, essentially.
In that story were priests and Levites and the other devout ones. So they seem to have got he seems to have got his idea of human solidarity without divine or religious permission.
Christianity did not exist at the time.
Anyone here who isn't a serf can say for themselves, yeah, were you taught that it might be a good thing to give blood? Was this inculcated into you? I can certainly say it wasn't into me. When I was a socialist, it was one of the things I was most proud of. I would go to give blood because we were proud of the fact that the British National Health Service never had to buy any. There was always enough. There were always enough people who would go and give a pint. Because why not? Why, by the way? They weren't giving one. I give a pint, I don't lose it. I regenerate it quite quickly. But
why is Dinesh trying to interrupt? Like, Hitch has been incredibly graceful in letting him just drill on and on and on. And Dinesh, I love how he's not allowing Dinesh to have his way at all, in any way, shape, or form. I love it. And, the best thing that Dinesh can do, and I've been in this position, something's occurred, I want to interrupt, and somebody said, excuse me. No, you're right. Sorry, that's my bad. That's the best thing you can do at that point. Acknowledge that, hey, you shouldn't be interrupting. That's true. That is true.
Someone gets one. Something in that gesture appeals to me.
Christopher,
I've done someone a good thing, and it hasn't cost me a sacrifice, and I don't have to act as if I've just done something incredibly virtuous and self-sacrificial and pious. And then, yes, as a matter of fact, I do have a very rare blood group, and one day I'm going to need some blood myself. And I hope enough other people are thinking about me in their way too.
So what Christopher Hitchens is describing here is reciprocity. Now, you can describe reciprocity as transactional, but part of it is speculative, right? And what I mean by that is you do something because it may or may not come back to you, right? That you are it's speculative reciprocity, that you're saying, hey, I am going to let people into my lane because I would like that in the future, even though I understand that may not happen. But if you want to live in that society, it's what's it called? It's called game theory. That if you want that to happen in your game theory, in your you have to do it yourself. Because if everybody says, well, I'll let everybody else do it and I won't, nobody will do it. Nobody will.
Yeah, what's that blind shit, I can't remember the name of it. It's the hypothetical where you set up the parameters of a society not knowing which role you're going to occupy in that society once the blinds are removed.
Yeah, that's a veil of ignorance. Veil of
That's
ignorance. By John Rawls, I believe, outlined that originally. That you ought to design a society where you don't know what your position in that society is going to be. Or rather, you should design a society where you would be relatively content being in the lowest rung of that society. And I totally agree with that. I think John Rawls was a genius in his sociological writings. He understood that everything doesn't have to be equal, but we ought to have a society where the people least worst off aren't, or the people worst off aren't denigrated too much because you might be one of those people. It shows an incredible amount of empathy for other people.
Natural or celestial permission is required for this, I ask him.
And I will answer.
Creates a mystery where none exists.
I will answer. In many cultures, people don't give blood. In many cultures, this idea that you should give a part of yourself for some guy that you don't even know, there's an old Indian proverb, the tears of strangers are only water.
Okay. So you're trying to say that that comes from Christianity. What cultures don't give blood?
I don't know.
I think I would really
weird,
like to.
The tears of strangers are only water is like antipathetic.
And
like,
you know, India, notoriously non-religious country.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Google's only mentioning religions that have beliefs that prevent the people from donating blood. And
oh yeah, we know one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, it mentions Jehovah's Witnesses, and they go back and forth on that one. I believe currently they do allow giving blood, but they switch back and forth every few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody besides them.
Well, he's talking about societies, and so when you're talking about a society, you're talking about a very large cross section of, you know, sort of people. So I don't know societies that. I mean, there'll be subcultures that don't. You know, maybe there's a subculture of neo-Nazis in Germany that don't donate blood and things like that, or you know, maybe there's a certain, you know, subculture that don't. But he said societies, which is a very specific word. I think he's just pulling this from his butt, to be honest with you.
The point I'm trying to get at is, it seems to me that on a personal level, you're right. No one maybe had to say to you, give blood, give blood, give blood. What you're missing is the fact that here you are, atheist Christopher Hitchens, educated and raised in a Christian culture, the culture.
No, bad, Dinesh. You can't just claim that it's a Christian culture. He wasn't raised in a Christian culture. Like, didn't you hear that he was working like he was a communist? Like, don't. What is that? We don't have a Christian culture. I'm sorry, we don't. Some people have Christian culture, sure, but culture in general is not Christian. You don't have a monopoly on culture. This is awful. Absolutely awful. That's like saying, well, Dinesh gives blood. It must be because of his Indian, you know, Hindu culture, you know, that his parents were raised in. You know, it's sort of, it's very, you know, no.
Of Christian Europe, where this idea of compassion, which was not there in the world before, Aristotle scorned it. Aristotle praised magnanimity, the superior man deigning to the inferior man, but not.
Compassion has been, you're claiming That
Jesus
compassion,
invented compassion.
did he teach it to things like capuchin monkeys that help each other out? Did he teach it to what was I watching? It was a few days ago. I was watching there was a mother horse trying to keep a stallion away from her child. Presumably the stallion would have killed it, and another female horse came and helped, even though they weren't related. Did Jesus come down and teach the horses compassion? Is that what happened?
Sure.
Like this is madness. People back in ancient Greek spoke about compassion for humans. People, what was the Persians released slaves under the guide. They had a compassionate nature. What madness is this where you're basically going, well, my religion created compassion?
Yeah, well, that's exactly the point, is he's trying to take credit for everything moral for Christianity. Like, sure, people before Jesus may have done things that we look back on now and say those were moral decisions, but they weren't doing them using moral logic or ethical calculus. They just happened to guess correct. Never mind that my mythology also says humans possessed knowledge of good and evil from the very beginning. That was the problem in the first place. No, it was Jesus. Okay.
Compassion in the sense of feeling for the other guy. It was Christ who invented that and brought it into the world. Now, you are...
That's such a wild claim, because we have writings from Confucius, from Buddha, from like thousands of years before Jesus explaining the concepts of compassion. Like, what are you talking about, Dinesh?
I hate to break it to you, Dinesh, but the golden rule was in the Book of the Dead of Egypt, sort of a moral guide on how to behave. It predated your book by a lot, by a whole heap. I think the first moral code was the code of Urnama, and that had things in it. I might just quickly look it up. I mean, it did have a lot of horrible prescriptions for breaking the code as well, but it was the first sort of moral code kind of
Damn,
thing.
that is old. 2100 BCE.
Well, to 2100 BCE. Yep. So if a man commits murder, that man must be killed. Robbery is killed. If a slave marries slave, and that slave is slave. So you'll probably see a few similarities between this and the Old Testament, right? If a man divorces his first-time wife, he shall pay her 1 mina of silver. Just some basic things. If a slave woman strikes someone acting with the authority of his mistress, we don't know what happens because the text was destroyed, kind of thing. If a man appears as a witness and was shown to be a perjurer, he must pay 15 shekels of silver. Just all of these things. It's a moral code, and it's not particularly good, admittedly. But this whole idea of compassion, it predates Christianity so much. I don't like. You're basically trying to claim that only Christians are moral, or Christianity is responsible for morality. It's absolutely absurd.
Parasitic on that. You are acting out those virtues, but you're refusing to pay debt or even acknowledge the Christian source of them. That, it seems to me, is a little ungrateful.
Because there was no Christian source. There was no Christian source. What the hell is he talking about? So in ancient Greek, it was philanthropia, right? It broadly reflects general kindness towards human beings by gods and or more often presence among upper class peers. And they had laws around how to treat travelers because of Zeus was also the god of travelers, kind of thing. Like, it's just this is a blatant attempt at hijacking all of morality for Christianity. This is terrible. This is absolutely terrible.
Historically.
That does not deserve applause. You have not shown that morality originated with Christianity in any way, shape, or form.
Let's move.
Yeah. Dr. Hitchens, I come from Tonga
No,
in the
Professor
South
Hitchens,
Pacific.
please.
Professor, before Christianity came, Tonga, Fiji, they have men for dinner. And in Tonga, it was mess. My question is, let's say they did not come to the Pacific. What do you have to offer us as an atheist? What do you have to offer us?
Well, should I ventriloquize the question? I'm not sure everybody heard it. The gentleman is from the island of Tonga, which is in the Pacific. Used to be British Crown possession. I don't know if it still is. I'm certain that's how the Christians got there anyway, thanks to British imperialism. And he says that before the Christians came, people were freely dining off one another. This is fair. In Fiji, yeah. I've heard the stories. It's often struck me as a tremendous problem. Why was no redemption ever sent to this island? Why did it go on? It reminds me of the question I closed by in my original statement. 98,000 years of human existence, and heaven watches with indifference. We're expected to believe 2,000 years ago intervenes by means of a human sacrifice in which all took part and which all must believe, and that's the salvation. And it's not offered to the Chinese, who at that stage can read and can write and can build boats and can have libraries and gunpowder and can spread an idea. No. It takes many thousands of years before, in a very weird form, it gets to China at all. There are parts of Borneo where people still practice cannibalism, where this message still hasn't spread. Now, this isn't a problem for me because I regard it as man-made. It isn't a problem for me. This is my answer because I regard it as man-made. The answer for you must be, unless you accuse humanism or secularism of advocating cannibalism, which it does not, is how come this design, this revelation, this redemption, this faith-based, and I should remind you earlier that my identification of the problem was precisely faith, the preference of that over reason and evidence. Why doesn't it seem to work?
Yeah, and so he's sort of saying why would a god intercede in one area where it's not going to spread fast, and it's sort of not why not sort of show this to everybody in the world at once? Why let it go on? Because I mean, when you're talking about imperialism, you're talking sort of 2,000 years after the events. It finally, through the aristocracy of England, gets to Tonga. What kind of divine intervention for the Tonganese is that? They go on slaughtering and eating each other for 2,000 years without God doing a damn thing about it until the British get around to invading them. Quite simply, the question is, well, what would have happened if colonialism did not invade these countries? Right? That's the question. And we don't know. We have no counterfactual for that. We have none whatsoever. That's the problem. Would they still be committing cannibalism? We don't know, because it did happen. So there are sort of remote tribes that are still incredibly violent, but there's also tribes that aren't violent and they weren't colonized. They just sort of, changed culture along with the rest of the world, because that's what happens. I don't know what it would be like if these countries were never colonized, because that didn't happen. It's impossible to say. What are your thoughts, Ember?
It reminds me of that tale of the, I believe it was an Inuit wise person who greeted a missionary, and he said, "Why are you here?" And the missionary says, why, to tell you the good news about Jesus. And he says, what is that good news? And the missionary says, well, you're horrible, wicked people doomed to go to hell. And the elder says, how is that good news exactly? And the missionary says, well, because if you just reject your barbaric ways and embrace the name of Jesus and beg forgiveness and send your money to the church and all the various things, then you will be spared from this horrible fate that I'm just now telling you exists. And the elder says, okay, I suppose that would be good news if it were true, but let me ask you this. What would your all-loving God do to us if you'd never come to bring us this news? Like, what did he do to our ancestors who never got this information? And he'd say, well, of course, your ancestors couldn't be held to account for not knowing these things since no one had been able to bring them, so they wouldn't be punished for not knowing. And so the elder says, well, then why the fuck did you tell us?
Yeah. Better off nobody knowing, and nobody is responsible. It's sort of this weird thing of, yeah, I don't know, but but don't forget that Dinesh has sort of claimed that Christianity is responsible for compassion. I'd like to see him back that one up.
Right?
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss. Yeah, absolutely.
Citation
Absolutely,
needed.
Jedi.
Why, whenever you ask, why is there so much suffering, misery, ignorance, backwardness, and barbarism? Why is that question unanswerable in the terms in which it's asked? You've just phrased it for Tonga and Fiji.
I think Christopher is missing the force of the argument here, which is not simply that the Christians have been negligent in carrying this universal message, but that when Christianity came to the rest of the world, it brought new values into those cultures. One time I said to my grandfather,
well, I don't know if it so much as brought new values as enforced them at the end of guns is really how I would describe it in most situations. I'm not sure bringing values is what it did. Like, he seems to think that the spread of Christianity was all done by just people having really lovely and nice discussions with people.
Cheerio, good day.
Yeah,
Keiko
death. Here, have Christianity, sir. What? Well, let's give you Christianity, and then you can go off and be moral. Cheerio. No, especially if you take India, for instance. Christianity did not arrive in India as some sort of, philosophy that was transmitted by the wise people of the English. No, the English came in with guns and slaughtered people until they took over the country and stole all their stuff. Like, Dinesh, what are you talking about?
Father, how come we are part of a tiny Christian minority in India? And he said 2 words: the Portuguese Inquisition. Meaning that some very zealous missionaries, possibly accompanied with some bayonets, came to India and Christianized the Indians. I want to say 2 things about this, however.
Is he making, so Portuguese missionaries came in, and he says possibly with bayonets? I would say certainly with bayonets and bullets and explosives and other things, yes. Came into India, yes. But that isn't why India used to be part of the Commonwealth. They used to be part of the Commonwealth because the English came in much later and did not leave.
Even though that may have occurred at the beginning, you found in a very short time large numbers of Indians rushing to Christianity. And why? As I looked into this matter, as I got a little bit older, I discovered that in the Indian caste system, you have 4 castes with the untouchables at the bottom. And if you're born an untouchable, you're finished. There's nowhere to go. You can't get out of it. Many of the people in the untouchable class were very attracted to Christianity because they saw it as affirming the idea of spiritual equality among persons. This was not immediately or even over a long time translated into complete political or social equality, but it meant something to say to somebody, you're not a nothing, you're not a dog, you are a human being, and that alone counts for a lot. What I'm trying to say, and I think what the gentleman here was trying to say, is that most of the world didn't have that. We didn't have it in Western civilization either. Christianity brought it in. Now, it imported some of it from Judaism, but Judaism was for the tribe. God instructs his chosen people. Christianity.
Oh my God. Like, a lot of it was also brought from Greek thinking. A lot of it was brought from Buddhist thinking. A lot of it was brought from all kinds of places. You don't have a monopoly on egalitarian thought. A lot of it came from, like, didn't he try to blame the slavery on the Enlightenment? Wasn't that Dinesh? Yeah, a lot of it came from the Enlightenment. Like, so this whole idea that Western, it comes from I mean, the entire feudal system was a caste system. If you were a peasant and a serf, more accurately, on the land, you didn't have rights as opposed to the aristocracy. A lot of this came during the Enlightenment. Like, Dinesh is crazy. He thinks that slavery didn't exist in the Christian world. Oh, yeah, it did. Oh, yeah, it did. And if Christianity is so, well, we are all equal, go ahead and explain antebellum slave owners being Christians. Explain that one.
Takes the idea and universalizes it. If you look at the rights that are stated in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, you notice something very interesting. You read those rights, they're universal rights? No. Virtually all of those rights are the specific legacy of Christianity. It's good that they're universalized because Christianity wanted from the beginning to use.
No, they're not a legacy of Christianity. They're more a legacy of the American Bill of Rights than anything else, like the American Constitution. For instance, Article 1, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. That is not taken from Christianity, right? That is not. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. That is not a thing of Christianity. That is not a hallmark of Christianity. Freedom of religion is not inherently built into Christianity. I'm sorry, it's not. Everyone has a right to life, liberty, and security of person. But think about the wording. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security. Doesn't that sound like something? Right? No one should be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery in the slave trade will be prohibited in all their forms. That would have been nice in the Bible. Just saying. Just saying. No one shall be subjected to torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the story of Jesus did not have that in it. That did not have that in it. Look, that reminds me more of the American Constitution than it does anything in the Bible, with good reason. Americans were very instrumental in creating and determining the UN. But don't forget that that was written by mostly deists, not Christians. And it's a very important distinction that Dinesh is trying to hijack everything for Christianity. And the UN Declaration of Universal Declaration of Human Rights does not come from Christianity. It does not. It's got a lot of origins. Sure, it possibly could have had an influence on it. Sure. You know, I no doubt it probably does, but there's also influences from the Enlightenment and especially the founding fathers of the United States. Sorry, they were deists. Get over it. They're not Christians.
universalize them, but they are not the shared rights recognized in all the cultures and practices, whether religious or non-religious, in other cultures. So I think we're seeing here from people who have experienced it. I don't care about those inquisitors who came a long time ago. I'm kind of grateful to them, although probably my ancestors would not have shared my enthusiasm.
Wow, did he just say that? We're lucky
he
those
sure did.
inquisitors came and tortured and killed people for not believing. Wow.
Yeah, what a lucky thing.
Yeah. So
nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
yeah,
He
wow.
didn't expect that.
Were the Salem witch trials and all the witch trials throughout history a good thing as well? You know, get that religion into the women as well.
Even without the religion, like, it's the same kind of logic. You know, the Salem witch trials, they're the reason that in much of the world today, courts don't accept spectral evidence as valid evidence. So we did get something good out of the Salem witch trials. Does that mean it's a good thing that they happened?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the ends justify the means, which is an awful moral sense. That's Machiavellianism, right?
Mhm.
The ends justify the means. So Machiavelli was sort of a Renaissance thinker who thought that anything is justified as long as the ends justify it. And that is a horrible way to think. That's like, well, if we want a stable society, we just kill everybody that's not making it stable. And that's his moral thing. Like, how Dinesh can talk about Christian morals and then go to, well, the ends justify the means is it's beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me.
Doesn't actually care about the morals. It's just a talking point to him.
Right.
But they brought me into the orbit of Christianity and Western civilization, and the fact that I have the values that I do, the beliefs that I do, the respect for dignity, women, equality, and so on, is entirely the legacy of Christianity.
I don't think the respect for women is a legacy of Christianity.
No.
Are you high? How is that a...
No, you could almost make a case for Islam being the origin of that one. It wouldn't be a very strong case, but you could make a better case than for Christianity.
I am blown away. Like, yeah, the women that were marching for suffrage were mostly Christian, but there was only mostly Christian people around. So he's claimed modern education is a result from Christianity. He's claimed that women's rights are from Christian. He's claimed compassion in general is obtained from Christianity. He is so full of it. Compassion existed way before Christianity. And people that aren't Christian and have never been, like, do you think that Chinese people who've never had a meaningful interaction with a Christian in their entire lives, they're not compassionate? They're just, not compassionate.
Likewise,
because China,
there are no Christians who aren't the pinnacles of compassion.
Right, exactly. Like, but it just baffles me that China, that's never been a Christian country, has never been influenced by Christianity, that people there, I mean, it has got a Christian contingent in China, sure, but it's so small that you could live your entire life within China and not even meet a Christian. Somehow, their compassion stems from Christianity. Somehow, I don't get it. I really don't. It's so bewildering. Dinesh is so full of shit. It's just insane.
As it was exported, I'm sorry to say, Christopher, not by the British, but by the Portuguese. The British could have done a better job.
I think the Portuguese could have done a better job as well. You said that they came with bayonets and killed. Yeah, they did. And it's frightening to think that he is advocating the good of religious inquisition and violent missionaries spreading their religion by the sword. Don't forget, he's saying that's a good thing right now. That's horrifying. That's absolutely horrifying.
Please. Next question, please.
The thing is, just a tiny thing. If you claim it for one, you have to claim it for all. It seems to me.
Right.
It means that means you accept that, yes, Hamas does a lot of good with social services. Yes, Louis Farrakhan gets black kids off drugs. Yes, the Mormons must have had a point, devout as they were, when they said black people didn't have souls, as they did until the 1970s. That everything attributable to religion must be attributable to it. You can't just pick and choose the bits that you like. The abolition of cannibalism is one thing. The Muslims say they abolished child sacrifice, but think of the things they also brought. And tell me if this doesn't show what I've been arguing from the first, that it is a man-made institution, not a divinely appointed one, and that you get exactly the sort of coincidences you would expect from that. The world looks as it would look if there was no God.
Next question, please.
My question is...
Well, okay, so a bit of criticism on Hitch. He's right. He's absolutely right. However, that's not what the debate is about. The debate is about, is Christianity the problem? I think sort of I guess I would have gone on stronger to say, hey, you can't just take the good that Christianity has done. All throughout this debate, that's all that Dinesh has done. Christianity has done this good here, this good here, this good. Yeah, look at all the horrible things that it did. You also said about the Inquisition, you just acknowledged that they forcefully converted people during the Inquisition. If you say that's the right thing to do, then it should be fine for Islam to forcibly convert people by the sword. Like, you can't say, well, it's moral for us, but it's not moral for them. Right? You can't say that.
For Mr. Hitchens. Sorry, keep getting them, but...
That's all right.
Movement, evolution, and change are hallmarks of human history. If religion poisons everything, as you claim, why haven't we just gotten rid of it and moved on?
We keep trying.
Yeah. Watch us.
So there are a couple of facets to this. The first is religion keeps evolving too, because the people who have power and draw their money from it want it to stay relevant, so they keep adapting it. It lags a generation or two behind the main culture, but yeah, that's why many Christian churches today do say slavery is bad. That's not what their book says, but they go along with it because they need to update to stay more relevant. We're seeing more and more progressive churches today that are embracing of LGBT people, not because their book says to, but because they know if they don't, they're going to go extinct. And it just keeps on rolling. Like, there's places where, Europeans and African descended people are allowed to get married. Shock. There's places where, I think it was the Episcopals had a rupture a few years ago over whether women could be pastors. Some said yes, some said no, and the church split apart over it. It's every conceivable issue. That's why there's so many denominations, because it's mutation in action in an anthropological cultural sense. Every variation is spawning off, and then we're seeing which ones survive and which ones don't. Yep. It's literally a kind of evolution. But then there's another facet to it. There is an actual social utility to religion. Not any particular religion, just religion in general, as that third space that some apologists talk about, somewhere that isn't home but isn't work, and you can still have reliable community. Or the psychological benefits of letting go of the big existential questions, like what happens to me after I die. Instead of being stressed, you can just invest your faith in something, regardless of whether it's true or not, and live your damn life. So yeah, there are pluses to it from certain points of view.
Yeah. And I mean, religion's always playing catch up. The Catholic Church has been playing catch up with modern morals for decades, more than decades, like about a century now. The amount of apologies they have had to issue for their various transgressions is incredible. And you're absolutely right, Ember. It's that they keep evolving alongside with society, because as soon as society deems them not to be acceptable or transgress society's morals too far, we kind of close them down. You know, there's a reason why, you know, all of these cults are closed down, kind of thing, because they're too transgressive of society. Could that work a bit harder? Yes. But evolution doesn't work on a timescale of, oh, well, it just realizes it's bad, instantly changes. No, that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. Religion is antibiotic resistant. Okay, yeah, no, that's yeah. Yeah, it's because these institutions evolve with humanity. Yeah.
I think that there are two reasons. I'll be quick, because I see when you're religion caters to our egocentricity, to our sense of self-importance, as well as to our masochistic tendencies. I'll say what I mean by that. Religion teaches us that we're originally sinful, that we're sinners in the hands of an angry God. The Quran says we're made out of a clot of blood. The Bible says out of dust. That we're born evil, we're wicked, we should sprawl, we should grovel, we should be glad that someone who even cares to look after us.
And I also want to add that, like, until very recently, Christianity had a general tendency to kill people that didn't think the same way. Like, all religions kill people that didn't think the same way until very recently. I mean, sort of recently, sort of over the whole course of human history. So if you had a better survival chance being Christian, then of course it would flourish and survive, because that's how evolution works. If something is advantageous, then it's an advantage, even if that advantage is sociological. If the advantage is that you have a better chance of surviving and procreating if you do adhere to this certain thing, then that's going to be an advantage because you're killed without it. So, yeah.
At all. Be grateful. I think this is a disgusting attitude, but you won't, I think, fail to recognize that it's a very accurate picture of what's preached. But, worm as you are, cheer up. The universe is designed with you in mind. And God has a plan for you, and you alone. So to this terrible groveling is added a terrific arrogance as well. Thus, you get the phenomenon of people like Mother Teresa, say, brushing past you and pushing you off the pavement, saying, sorry, out of my way, don't mind me, I'm just on errand for God. And they call this modesty. That's why it appeals. And the second reason why it appeals is, I don't know why this is, because I don't see what there is to fear in it. You're not going to know when you're dead. You're not going to know it. So there's nothing to be frightened of. But people are frightened of death. And the central lie of all religion is that there's a cure for this. And an exception will be made in your own case. An eternal life offered if you make the right propitiations and the right abjections. Well, I'm sorry. I think that's the height of immorality to lie to people like that.
That's...
Well, it's a cheat code.
Yeah, I don't think he addressed the actual question though. Like, why does it survive? Number one, evolution's slow. That's what I would say. Number one, evolution's slow. It doesn't have this sort of thing. Number two, I already outlined. Number three, just because something has an evolutionary benefit in the past doesn't mean it will going into the future. There may have been an evolutionary benefit to have religion there, but does that mean it's true or that we need it into the future? No. Like, take, for instance, our fear response. Evolutionarily, it's really good that we have this fear response of certain stimuli, but it causes a lot of problems in our modern society when we're not living in sort of a very primitive tribal area with sort of, saber-toothed tigers possibly jumping out at us. It's not as useful. It's something that is a latent sort of a hangover of past evolutionary behaviors. and we've got to deal with it in some way. So the thing that they're thinking is they're making a sort of mistake saying, well, if something is evolved, it must be good. No, if something is evolved, it must have been good at the time it evolved. That doesn't mean it's good now. That doesn't mean it's good always. That, like, we're talking relatively speaking. Relative to what? Relative to the circumstance and the environment in which we live.
That's why it survives. That's why it survives.
Let me answer, if I may. Religion poisons everything. Christopher is known for literary flair. I think what we've seen here today, when I first came to America, I lived in Arizona, I went to a rodeo, and I'm sort of reminded of that. We have a point here, a point there, and just a lot of bull in between. Now,
looks like, again, Dinesh is immune to irony because he has been, like, to be honest with you, the most bull I've ever heard is Christianity is responsible for compassion. That is such a blatant pile of BS. I don't even know what to say to that.
Our friend Colin does.
The irony here is abundantly obvious, and the fact that these people don't notice it is just astonishing.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Thanks, Colin.
here's what I mean by that. Isn't it a case of gross rhetorical and argumentative excess? I mean, did religion poison Shakespeare or Milton?
You could argue a case for that, maybe.
Somebody's poisoned the water hole!
Well, I mean, you could point to Richard III. You could point to the influences that the church may have had upon the plays at the time. I don't know. I think that as far as Shakespeare is concerned, it didn't have a lot to do with Christianity. It went into, you know, a lot of different things. It had what's with the Oberon and things like that. Midsummer Night's Dream had a lot of sort of peasant folklore. Yeah, because that's who the plays were aimed at. They weren't aimed at, you know, other things.
Yeah, you might have better luck with Dumas and Cardinal Richelieu.
Right,
you know, like,
right.
He's depicted as a rogue agent, but he's still wielding church authority in very Catholic France.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think that it possibly could have poisoned if religion had anything to do with it. Like if there were bishops and pontiffs and people telling Shakespeare what to write, I think they would absolutely poison the work. Yes. Yes.
Or Dante, or Michelangelo, or Raphael, or Bach.
Does he think they weren't?
Yeah.
Like, that's honestly more of a capitalism problem than a religion problem. Because, like, Michelangelo, for example, gifted artist, obviously. But to survive as an artist, you need a patron. And so you make the things that the person paying your money so you can eat wants. So the Catholic Church, big patron, wonderful gig. But that means you got to make a whole lot of religious stuff.
Yeah.
Are they corrupted by religion? No.
Religion was the one paying the bills. I don't know. I think Michelangelo would have been just as gifted if he did not paint religious, icons or,
what if he'd been hired by the King of Italy instead? I'm sure there wasn't an Italy. It was the Papal States and then various the King of Genoa, whatever,
Lombardy or something.
Yeah, and he was his commission was to show the bravery of our explorers or what the fuck ever. Like, we'd get just as magnificent works, but with a different theme.
Yeah.
Their work is in some ways an exhibition of a transcendent reflection as we see in art. Even secular people should be able to appreciate that and to recognize that that is the special legacy of our civilization.
I can appreciate the art, but I don't think God had a hand in it. Like this is the ironic thing. He talks about Hitchens doing rhetoric, and it's all this, a lot of bull and stuff, and then he comes out with these ridiculous statements. Oh, this art transcends the. Are you serious? It's just
Isn't
really
it
good art.
fascinating that art requires an artist, to borrow from Ray Comfort here. Like, if you've got an all-powerful God who wants everyone to know he exists, why do humans have to make the statues? Why aren't lightning bolts leaving statues of Jesus all over the countryside or whatever?
Yeah,
like, God should be a better artist than humans.
You know who was an amazing artist? Salvatore Dali was an amazing artist as well. And part of his art was he was the one that did the melting clocks and things like that. Just incredible. And I'd been lucky enough to see an exhibition on him. A lot of his stuff was very dark and, like you would say, satanic, but undeniably beautiful in its encapsulation of mortality and the darker side of it. Like, we don't look at art and go, well, it panders to me, so therefore no, it's what evokes emotion is what it's supposed to be. So it's so ridiculous. God is good for society because art. What are you talking about?
Built in part on Greece.
Okay, for my counterpoint, I'll go to Christian rock bands. I rest my case. I rest my case.
But also an equal, if not larger part, on Jerusalem. Now, we are now coming closer to the core of what this debate is about. This idea here that religion is a form of wish fulfillment. Christopher didn't think of that. Sigmund Freud said it. Marx said it in a different way. Religion is the opium of the people. We can't face life. We can't face death, so we make up stuff. Now, I could give a
fairly
religious
accurate
rebuttal to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not that they make it up themselves, but they are passing a coping mechanism down for people that could not cope with not knowing what happened, or sort of could not accept not existing, right? So I don't think they themselves make it up. I think they've been indoctrinated, and that passed down from people that had no idea what was going on. Like, they didn't understand the human brain. They didn't understand how particles work. They didn't understand atoms. They didn't understand any of this stuff.
Yeah, but it is participatory. It doesn't just
Sure.
evolve on its own. It has to be run through the brains of every person who has it, and that's kind of
that's true. Yeah.
kind of the refutation of the Ray Comfort point. Like, every religion needs a religionator. Like, Jesus didn't create Christianity. You could argue that Paul did, but even he didn't do it single-handedly. He had to borrow authority from the surviving 11 and so on.
Yeah.
And even then, it wasn't just Paul. It was the church leaders in the 7 different churches, and it was, the leaders later who decided to put Paul's letters into the canonical texts, and yada 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 yada. It's a bunch of fucking people.
Yeah.
It's different
that's fair.
steps along the way. We've discussed in previous debate reviews how Augustine went through and applied the rules of rhetoric to the Gospels as we understand them today. Not only did he edit them, but he also made them a lot more powerful and compelling. This whole guilt trip of Jesus died for you, that was Augustine, making it more compelling. Now a lot of people feel like they can't leave because they owe this guilt to Jesus, and it's part of the whole trip. So lots of people contributed. Just like a real building. A building requires a builder. No, a building requires a team of builders.
Yeah.
You know, you have an architect, certainly, but then you've also got your operational manager on the ground who goes, this drawing is fantastic, but the foundation needs to be twice as thick to support the weight of this beastie. So he makes the modification. And then the people doing the actual laying of the foundation, oh, well, this soil is a lot more squishy than the project manager thought. Let's reinforce it, and so on and so on. It's a community project. Same thing with everything humans do.
And this Gospel of Thomas wing is so not needed and makes the building look ugly. Let's just take it off the plan. Just scrub. Never happened. Never happened.
Which would look something like this. I can totally see why in a wish fulfillment world, we would invent heaven. Heaven is cool. And if I wanted to get away from my...
Is it though?
I was just wondering that.
Like, yeah, at first glance, yeah, it seems cool. And then when you actually start to logically pass it, it seems not horrible, but in a way there's flaws in there, like some horrific flaws in there that have some very, very horrible entailments. Like the idea that it's heaven by itself for everybody, maybe, but that's not your heaven. You also have to include the hell for people who don't believe. And that's where I have the problem. I care about my fellow human beings. If I was to go to heaven and not care about my fellow human beings in hell, I would not be me.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true for a lot of people, even people who think they're good Christians. Like, I don't see somebody who's going, oh, God's justice be served and all this crap, get to heaven and find their grandma is burning in the pits of sulfur and being okay with it.
Yeah.
Diabetes or the fact of death, I might say, I'd like to live in heaven. I don't think I would have made up hell. Hell is more severe than diabetes.
You don't think they would have made up hell. So if you're having problems with people actually doing what you need them to do, you don't think you'd make up punishment for people.
Yeah, the rhetoric there shows that it's human made too. Like, there were ideas for these sorts of things in ancient cultures. Like, Hades is the place you go if you haven't served one of the gods to earn the reward of their chosen afterlife.
No, slightly incorrect. Hades was the whole thing. So you had Mount Olympus where the gods resided, but spirits didn't go there. They went to Hades. Hades was split into a number of realms, one of which was the Fields of Elysium, which is where all the heroes went, all the people that did right by the gods, it wasn't really who were morally right, but rather who were legendary and did great deeds kind of thing, went to the Fields of Elysium. The Fountain of, I always mispronounce the word, the Fountain of Naphtali was where ordinary people went and they drank from the river Styx, forgot everything. It was it was Tartarus, the plains of Tartarus, that the nasty people went. That's where Sisyphus was, for instance, the guy rolling the boulder up the hill for it to roll down again. Or Tantalus, who would try to eat and drink and they'd move away from him and he was always hungry and always thirsty for all of eternity kind of thing. So it really was Tartarus that was the equivalent to hell, but Hades was heaven, hell, and in between, sort of a limbo state all in one.
The whole afterlife. Okay, I got
it.
But the point is that this concept of punishment for not earning the good afterlife has been around for a long time. The Christians who borrowed these ideas from other cultures they did it in the most juvenile way possible. They didn't just say, let's increase the severity to increase the zeal of our followers. They said, let's turn this all the way up to infinity. Because then, no God will be more vengeful than our God, I guess.
Well, the whole point is that the ancient Israelites didn't have an idea of heaven and hell. It was Sheol, and all spirits went there. It was more like the middle section, like everybody just went to the same place, and that was it. It really was after Hellenistic influence that they had this idea of an afterlife with a reward, like the Elysium Fields, and the plains of Tartarus, which were the horrible place kind of thing. So I don't think that was inherently built into the religion. I think it sort of evolved like that. It sort of came like that, and that certainly does speak to human invention. But I don't think it was invented by the Christians. I think it came from other influences of rewards and punishment. And the reason why it got into Christianity is because it works on people. It gets them to do what you want. Don't
a theological ERV.
Well, you can see the progression from do this or else God's going to smite your ass, right? Like, so things like, them worshipping the golden calf, they worshipped another, and, God gets angry and attacks them kind of thing and smites them. So it's kind of this punishment directly follows transgression in the early religion of sort of Israelites, like she-bears come and rip you apart for doing this. And it moves to the punishment comes after you're dead, right? It moves to this idea of if you do terrible things in this life, you get punished in the next one. And it works really well. It does work.
Yeah, I've heard a few Bible scholars mention that too, that you can see this progression from the Old Testament where punishment happens immediately. Dude uses the wrong incense in the Holy of Holies. Bam, dead. To later on, Jesus is talking about being judged at the end of time. Like you die, you stay dead, and then you're raised for judgment at the end of time. So that's Jesus already showed a change in the beliefs, but he never said a damn thing about heaven and hell. Those came later. And now it's, you're judged immediately, and it's either eternal paradise or eternal suffering, and there's no in between,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sort of the Egyptians had an idea of being judged. They had I believe Thoth would measure your heart. The Thoth was the god of knowledge from memory. They would measure your heart against a feather. And if your
is it lighter than a feather?
Is it lighter than a feather? Right. And if your heart was not, you would have your soul devoured by, I can't remember the crocodile god's name, but the crocodile god essentially would devour your soul. If it wasn't, you would go on to some sort of blessed existence. So this idea of punishment and reward after you're dead, I don't think they just made it up, but I think somebody made it up. I think that it sort of, I don't know why he would think that, oh, no one would ever make that up. You know what? It works remarkably well to get people to do what you want. Mm-hmm. It really does. Religion really does get people to do things that they ordinarily would not do. I don't think a lot of people would have done a lot of things if they didn't think that A, they would get some kind of benefit after they die, or B, they would get punished if they didn't do it after they die.
Yeah, like compare it to a much, much, much older religion, Hinduism, right?
Right.
Like in that faith, everybody gets to live again after they die. Everybody gets an afterlife. If you do good, then you'll move slightly along on the wheel. If you do bad, then you'll move slightly backward. It's not mega consequences. It's going to take you dozens and dozens of lives to reach nirvana. So don't try to get it all in one shot. You can't get it all in one shot. All you can do is try to be a relatively decent person and do good in the world when opportunities arise. And that's
Right.
all it's asking of you. It's a very low obligation religion, but at the same time, it's also low emotional manipulation on that count. Because it's not like if you do this one thing, your soul is damned for eternity.
Yeah.
Diabetes. It's a little tougher than that. So why would a wish fulfillment inventors of religion come up with the rules of self-denial and so on that make our life more difficult, more sacrificial? We would make it easy. We'd start by taking out that commandment against adultery. If we were making it all up.
Didn't they, though? Isn't that the entire point of Jesus? You can do literally anything and just say, Jesus, forgive me, and you're sin-free.
There's a lot of adulterers out there who think they're going to heaven. Just saying.
It's true.
Final point. The idea of religion as wish fulfillment makes no evolutionary sense at all. A point made by the atheist Steven Pinker. He says this: it makes no evolutionary sense to make stuff up that threatens your own survival.
What?
That's not how evolution works, my guy.
Yeah. Is Dinesh just making up quotes? Like, I feel like he's quote mined a whole lot. Like, he seems to be going to Steven Pinker. Who is Steven Pinker, anyway?
I've heard the name, but I can't place it right at the moment. But, yeah,
Professor of psychology at Harvard. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like, sacrificing your own life. Like, say you go off on the Crusades, whatever. Yeah, there is an evolutionary advantage to that.
Absolutely.
You know, you're whether you've already reproduced or not, and you're doing something that will ensure the future of your children, whether financially or against invaders or whatever, there's definitely an evolutionary advantage. But there's also the evolutionary advantage of culture and civilization, right? Like, the purpose of a civilization is to increase the odds of the members of that civilization's capability to produce healthy offspring who grow up safe and live to reproduce themselves. Civilization serves the needs of evolution. That's why it's there. When a civilization comes along that does a job better, it replaces the preceding civilization. So when you go off to go crusade and spread the influence of your civilization, make your civilization stronger, even if you get killed, that helps your civilization, where your genetic material is, even if it's not your children, your cousin or your uncle or whatever, their children. It helps increase their odds of successfully reproducing. Or if you go off to war to stop an invader, same thing. You're protecting your genetic lineage within that civilization, even if it's not your direct descendants. There absolutely is an evolutionary advantage to this.
And we see a lot of sort of self-sacrificing behavior. Like I said, like even in horses. Like I saw the other day, some horse came and helped a mother protect her foal just because they're part of the same herd. That's the whole point. What evolutionary benefit did she have for protecting somebody else's foal? Well, they worked cooperatively so that when she has a foal, the mother will help her. That's the whole point. That's what pro-social behaviors get you to, is cooperative strategies for survival. It's not hard to understand. I don't know why they don't understand this.
They don't think that way.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Imagine this. I am a rabbit. I am being pursued by a lion. I have to decide whether to run. I decide I will not run. Why? There is another life waiting for me, even better than this one. What would be the fate of such a rabbit? It would be immediately eaten. Rabbits who engaged in wish fulfillment would...
Well, that.
Yeah.
As we've discussed a few times before, there's this fallacy that apologists like to say: there are no atheists in foxholes. It turns out, not only are there atheists in foxholes, there are no theists in foxholes. Because here's all these people who claim to believe that a super afterlife is waiting for them the instant they get dead. You would think they'd be thrilled that a frickin' mortar shell is coming at them in this foxhole. But shock and surprise, they all start screaming that they don't want to die. So they don't, at the very deepest level, they don't actually believe the bullshit that they sprout all the time. You will get the occasional, oh God, save me, but the point is they don't actually want to go to this afterlife they claim to believe in.
No, of course not. Because the people that sort of willingly embrace death haven't survived to generate more people. Hot take, I know. But that's generally what doesn't happen. Now, if that group of, say, 100 rabbits all went, well, we've got an afterlife, let's charge that lion, right? 100 rabbits against the lion, I don't know who would win, but the lion may well be seen off by that behavior. Don't forget that honey badgers do it all the time. Honey badgers just don't care. Have you ever seen a honey badger engage with like, they are the most stubborn, obnoxious, and violent things I have ever seen them. I saw a documentary where a honey badger took on 3 lions, a mother and 2 cubs, and the mother really didn't want anything to do with the honey badger. Like, really, and this thing is tiny. They are just belligerent. They are the biggest assholes in the animal kingdom. And the honey badger basically charged the lion. And the lions eventually did not want anything to do with this thing. So your whole idea that, there's certain behaviors that will not lead to survival. If those rabbits band together and are absolutely vicious, they may actually have a better survival chance. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm not saying that that's how they what will happen. But a lot of the time, survival strategies work upon cooperative behaviors and sacrificing part of the population to ensure the survival of the rest.
And on the flip side, you've got instances where this religious wish fulfillment thing goes very, very wrong. Jonestown, for example. They really believed they were going to the afterlife, so they gave their children the Kool-Aid too.
Yeah, but if you ever get a chance, look up honey badger versus lions or something like that. There's tons of videos out there of honey badgers just taking on animals so much bigger than them, and just being such a pain in the ass. Like, just so. So an animal basically will go, that is not worth it for a meal. So the honey badgers, one of their survival mechanisms is because they are so notoriously bad-tempered and difficult for animals to deal with, an animal, unless they're absolutely starving, they don't bother with the honey badger. It's not worth it, which is an insane survival strategy, just sheer survival by outright belligerence. And it works.
Not survive. That's the point. You need a better theory.
Tell me you don't understand evolution without saying I don't understand evolution.
Yeah,
Caesar.
I know. Yeah. It's our argument from ignorance, argument from incredulity, etc. There's a bunch of nonsense tied up in that. But he's basically saying, I don't understand it, therefore what you're saying is wrong, and therefore my made-up bullshit is automatically correct.
Yeah. Well, he's also just doing a straw man of evolution. Like, it's just a two-dimensional sort of parody of what evolution, the theory of evolution, actually says, and sort of saying, well, I can defeat that. I've defeated evolution. No, you in no way have, D'Souza, in no way. Like, just because you say this is what evolution is and you don't understand it doesn't mean that's what it is.
It's 9 o'clock, and normally we would move to concluding statements by our 2 debaters, but both of them before the debate told me they would waive those last statements in order to allow another question or 2. So let's have another one.
Mr. Hitchens, you began your opening statement by decrying the very concept of faith or beliefs in the absence of good, solid, supportable evidence. There was an American psychologist named William James who was a great believer in faith, and he insisted that the wonderful contribution of Christianity was to allow us to make leaps of faith that the laws of science or even mere common sense would decry as completely unsupportable. It's unlike a man of faith. Can a completely rational mind have the courage to, for instance, take a leap of faith with a total stranger that could lead to friendship, or maybe even with a dire enemy in the hope that that might ultimately lead to peace?
I think you're confusing the leap of faith.
Yeah, I was going to say that a leap of faith isn't necessarily faith. Like, I think he's conflating those two.
Yeah, he's inserting a word that doesn't really fit. But there's no reason. Sun Tzu comes to mind, right? The number one rule is if you can convert an enemy into an ally, then you have won a total victory.
Without lifting a sword, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we use Sun Tzu today in business strategies and things because it applies to all. So Sun Tzu basically said that all of warfare is deception.
Mm-hmm. Which raises some eyebrows when it comes to religion, which claims to be like, well, a religion that claims to be all truth anyway, or the source of all truth, or whatever. It's spiritual warfare, and all warfare is deception. Okay, what are you saying?
Risk or chance. The leap of faith, which I attribute to Kierkegaard, not to the varieties of religious experience, is what's necessary to get you across a gap where no evidence exists, maybe to the contrary. And the problem with that, though I can see the will behind it, is that you can't make it just once and find yourself on the other side. Faith got me across this chasm. Now I'm safe. You have to keep on making it. You have to keep on going to church, sometimes several times a week, to assure yourself you were right to believe it in the first place. And it becomes morbid and ritualistic and irrational. And you're back where you started, on the wrong side of the chasm. Otherwise, this argument, we wouldn't be having this argument if Christianity had an answer to any of this, or any other religion. Right?
In Christopher's book, he makes the argument, I think I've seen him quoted saying this too, that the absence of evidence is evidence of absence. You don't see evidence for something, don't believe it. I would suggest that in the empirical domain, in the world of human experience, that is a valid principle. It even applies to miracles. If someone came to me and said, my leg grew 3 feet last week, I would say, let's bring in the doctor with the measuring stick. Let's see if it actually happened.
What do you mean in the physical world? How else are we supposed to, like, unless someone's come up with a way to measure the spiritual world while my back was turned, I don't know how, how this would apply to the spiritual world. Is this special pleading? Just seems like, well, yes, that is true, except when it comes to my thing. Because here's the rub. He will not apply that standard to Islam. He will not, right? He won't say, hey, there's no evidence for it. Let's just believe it on faith.
Are in the domain of verification. However, the non sequitur here is the following. There are many questions that are vital to our life because they would affect the way we live that are not in the empirical domain. Let's say I would ask you, is there life after death? Shakespeare says death is the undiscovered country. No one who's gone there has ever come back. And it's certainly not in a natural. So here's the question. How would you subject that proposition to testing? What possible evidence are you looking for when it is not in the empirical domain? Christopher says...
Oh, yeah,
an interesting thing for him to touch on. Like, yeah, Shakespeare did say death is the undiscovered country and nobody's ever come back. Cool. Dinesh is here defending a mythology that is entirely about a dude who came back. It's really weird how he never said anything about what death is like or what to expect there, or like none of it. All this heaven and hell shit is from Revelations,
Yeah. And it's odd. It's kind of, shouldn't you be telling us what evidence you have that there is life after death? I feel like he's shifting the burden of proof to say, hey, you've got to prove that there's nothing in the afterlife. Because, like, what kind of evidence would you expect? Well, something. Why don't you tell us how you're investigating this? I don't understand. Like, because I don't think there is anything after death, so I would expect nothing. It's like saying, you're saying, well, I have a Lamborghini, and you saying, well, show me the evidence that you have this Lamborghini, and you saying, well, it's in another country. What evidence would you expect? Well, the fucking Lamborghini, dude. Like, what are you talking about?
Oh, it's worse than that. It's him saying no one has ever owned a Lamborghini, but also my friend Jesus owns a Lamborghini. I can't show you proof, and no one has ever owned a Lamborghini, but Jesus owns a Lamborghini.
It's so weird. He's sort of going, well, I can't get evidence that will be evidence because it's not evident. It's not something that I can demonstrate. What would convince you? Something you can fucking demonstrate, dude. What is wrong with you? That's like me saying I have an invisible dragon, and nobody can see or hear or touch it, but it's my invisible dragon. And you saying, well, it's not there. There's no evidence for that. And me saying, well, you won't see the evidence with your senses empirically. What do you expect for you to believe me?
What we need is spiritual data.
Well, unless you find some way to investigate the spiritual. Look, I'm not saying that there's no way to investigate the spiritual, but unless you find that, I do not believe you. And nobody ought to believe you. Because here's the thing, you're not giving the same standard to Islam or Hinduism or Norse mythology or any other religion out there, Scientology or whatever. When they say, hey, you can't see it empirically, you still say, well, you've got no evidence, I don't believe you. You are not being intellectually consistent.
It's automatically rejected out of hand, since there is no evidence, but there is no evidence in a domain where evidence is unavailable. So I would suggest that here we have the dogmatic atheism.
Yes, but evidence is unavailable for Christianity and for Islam. Why do you believe one over the other? That's the question.
I run into this one all the time. My youngest asked me the other day, like, why are you so all about this atheism business? You know, like why Christianity, why etc. I'm like, okay, so here's the thing. Not only do I perceive that the religion is potentially harmful, it attempts to control people, terrifies people with fear of hell years after they deconvert. Purity culture does all kinds of damage to people's entire lives. Like there's a lot of bad shit. And now they're trying to like make the U.S. a theocracy, and that's not good either. But also, there's the bigger issue of they're saying, well, what's wrong with Christianity? Aside from all the things that's obviously wrong with Christianity, it's not just Christianity. Like if I didn't like Christianity, but I was still okay with religion, maybe I'd be Muslim, maybe I'd be Buddhist. I'd probably be Buddhist, but whatever. It's because from an outsider perspective, I see Christians making claims, and I see Muslims making claims, and I see Buddhists making claims, and I go, but all of you have exactly the same evidence, which is to say nothing. So who am I to believe?
Well, none of you. That's the whole point. Just as you don't believe the UFO guy who has no evidence, or the Bigfoot guy who has no evidence, or the fairy guy that has no evidence. We all put you on the same level. You have no evidence. We don't believe you. Any more than, my invisible dragon. I don't have evidence. Don't believe me. It's as simple as that. And some claims like, whether I have a dog may be innocuous. It doesn't really matter. But there's some claims which are not. And this is the ones that are not.
That, because it doesn't know, refuses to believe. Now, if you ask me, do I know? I would say, no, on this point, I don't know either. The believer shares the agnosticism with the atheist, but the difference is the believer says, even though I don't know, I believe. Remember, the statement of belief is not a statement of knowledge. I know my brother. I wouldn't say I believe in my brother. I know the guy. The reason I say I believe is because I don't know. So what I'm saying is, why is it in any way more irrational for me to take a position on one side of an issue than for him to take the other side of the issue on which there is no empirical evidence on either side? I would submit.
I'm sorry, did you just say I believe because I don't know?
Why would it be less rational for me to take the position of saying we don't have any evidence, so I'm not going to believe it until there's a reason to believe it. Why would that be less rational? Oh my goodness.
The way this guy's mind works is tragic. So I state, hey, there's a teapot in Alpha Centauri. You now have to believe that to be intellectually consistent because we don't know. We have no evidence against a teapot in Alpha Centauri. I could say that that humans were originally planted by bird creatures as pods in the dawn time. You have no evidence against that. You should believe it. The entailments of what Dinesh just said are so outrageously absurd. This is this is absolutely terrible. This is absolutely terrible. Dinesh, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Broken brain.
This is wow.
I mean, it's a leap of faith for both of us. The only difference is I am leaping toward God. He's leaping against him.
No, it's not a leap of faith to say there's no evidence, so I don't believe it. That is perfectly rational. Whereas saying there's no evidence, so I believe it, that is not a rational stance on anything. We don't look at a criminal and go, well, there's no evidence, so I believe they committed the crime. For or against. Could you imagine that? Like, oh, there's no evidence that they didn't murder that person, so we're going to convict him.
Mm-hmm. It's equally rational. We're just leading pro-justice.
Yeah, equally rational. We're just making a leap of faith towards conviction, and you're making a leap of faith against it. What is wrong with your brain, Dinesh? Oh.
Yes, last question, please.
Thank you both. My question is for Christopher. I've heard you say in several debates that I've seen online that you do not deny the existence of either the transcendent or the numinous. And that's the language that you use.
Yes.
And I was just thinking, given your obvious antipathy towards religious belief and superstition, I think a lot of people come to religion and come to religious belief after having some sort of peak experience, either a transcendent experience, an experience of the numinous. So my question is, how would you advise someone, or what sort of recommendation would you make for someone that has that sort of experience, but doesn't want to interpret that in?
So as far as I understand it, and I might have to look this up, give me a sec, but noumena is as opposed to phenomena. So it means sort of, I think divine things or unearthly things or things that transcend sort of the physical kind of thing. But I'm not sure how it's being used exactly. I just have to look up noumena.
Yeah, you're on the right track. It's things that go beyond the mortal experience that make you believe in something more, they're hard to describe because it's different for every person. Like,
right.
As a person who loves the stars, when I go out and I see like the Milky Way and the galaxies and just the crescent of moon just so, and it just the overall moment, the totality of the experience exceeds the human realm. And something like that can make you go, wow, I am super insignificant. The universe is amazing and gigantic. Or it might make you go, wow, I'm super important because an undead carpenter ghost made all this just for me.
Right. Yeah, so I'd really like to know how Hitchens was using sort of numinous or noumena in that sense, because a lot of people use noumena as opposed to phenomena. Like phenomena is our empirical senses picking up things that are occurring in the physical world. That's phenomena, right? When noumena is something else, like that feeling of awe can be numinous. Noumena, hypothetical things that can't be perceived. Yeah, that's right, Reed.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that it's something like what they describe as the burning in the bosom or the feeling the presence of God. When it doesn't. I mean, I felt that, and I can see how they could get that impression, but it's not obviously any particular god. It's just a feeling. It's not like I am the voice of Jesus in your heart.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. It's a word that I don't encounter a lot. Like I've heard of it in sort of philosophical circles, but not outside of it. So I don't know if Hitchens, presumably Hitchens know what it means if he's talked about it before. But a lot of this, I'm not even sure if Hitchens has said what like Dinesh has said he said, or some other people. Like it's pretty bad, the quote mining that Dinesh has been doing here.
Into religion because they're so just profoundly disoriented after having like some sort of experience of transcendence.
Okay, well, what I say, I'm very touched that you noticed it, is that the transcendent and the numinous, which I wouldn't trust anyone who didn't have, should be distinguished from the supernatural. That, for example, I'm just about to forget his last name. Francis is his first name. He's the Collins of the Human Genome Project, with whom I had a long session the other night, says that he was hiking one day, I think it was in the Pacific Northwest. There was a frozen waterfall that had 3 streams frozen. It was a frozen trinity, if you like. And at that moment, he says, he got down on his knees and accepted Jesus Christ. Now, I will simply have to say, of someone whose work I enormously respect, and who I believe I've quoted correctly, that to me is a wild non sequitur. The people who talk like that are, it may be a deformity in me, I think it's white noise to talk like that. White noise. And I don't think I'm missing anything, because I'm quite just as fond of the music of Verdi, say, as I was when I thought he was a Christian, assumed he was, as when I found out that he wasn't. And many other great famous musicians and painters who actually turn out to, in their devotional efforts, not to have been themselves devoted. And that's why I don't think, I'm going to take a bit of my answer to reply to Dinesh just now, on this point of whether these things apply to both of us. No, they don't. When I say I think that that's a meaningless statement, I'm not making a meaningless statement myself. Anyone can say that they understood what I said about Francis Collins' remark. By the same token, when I had a debate on Hugh Hewitt's program, a very fair-minded, very intelligent Christian, he got me on with his favorite Presbyterian. He said, this is the man you have to beat. And I said, all right, we went at it. One of the questions I asked him was about the resurrection. Do you agree with the verse in St. Matthew that says that at the time of the crucifixion, all the graveyards of Jerusalem opened and the dead came out and walked and greeted their old friends and so forth? And I was going on to ask him, because if you do, it seems to me to cheapen the idea of resurrection if it was so commonplace. That's where I was going with it. But he thought I was asking whether literally true or not. He said, well, as a Christian, yes, I absolutely do believe it. But I'm not so sure I believe it as a historian. I will just have to say that to me, that nonsensical remark is a statement of faith. And what I've just said about its nonsensical character is not itself a meaningless remark, because it's intelligible to everybody here. And that should weigh a little in this argument, it seems to me. Thank you.
Oh, the sound on this is terrible. It's been terrible all the way through, but I'm just,
yeah, the
I probably should have
microphones
drawn
are
attention to it.
Weird.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's almost like the audio tech was like turning microphones up and down as each person spoke, and often didn't turn them all the way up.
Yeah.
It's very peculiar. The thing he said about Francis Collins is fascinating, because I did a video on Francis Collins a few months ago where he talks about C.S. Lewis's conversion story because he felt like his own was not compelling enough. Which is weird. Like, it was compelling enough for you to convert, but you don't want to share that with other believers? It's
I mean, I think a lot of
strange.
people have pointed out sort of just how does 3 waterfalls get you to God kind of thing. So he feels it's not, it's sort of, like Hitchens says, it is a bit of a non sequitur,
There's a missing
waterfalls.
stepping stone.
Right. So,
Like,
I get why it's not compelling.
If he went on to explain why it was significant to see 3 waterfalls, not just 3 represents the Trinity, but like he'd been wandering along, possibly reading C.S. Lewis, and pondering, how the fuck does the Trinity work? How can it be 3 separate things, but one thing both at the same time? And just as he's thinking this thought, he rounds the corner, and there's a single river with 3 waterfalls that return into being a single river at the end. And he went, oh, that's the answer. And also perceives it as God answering his internal question. in just that right circumstance, then maybe I could see a person going, oh, not only does it resolve this metaphysical quandary about the nature of the Trinity, but it also shows God is sending me personally a sign right now in real time in my life. That might be reason to convert. I mean, I'd call it a bad reason, but...
Sure.
I don't know what Francis Collins was getting at, but I can tell you a little bit about what Kepler was getting at. I think when you look at nature, you notice that there is enormous intelligence embodied in nature. And this...
How?
Really? Really? Most things are dumb as dirt. Dirt also in nature.
Dumber than dirt. Dirt is full of all kinds of fascinating, complex biological and chemical systems. I'm thinking of like the sun. It's hydrogen. It burns, and occasionally the electromagnetic forces cause it to shoot out plasma in our general direction. But it really only does one thing all the time.
Right. I don't understand that.
This is, I think, for the person who thinks about it, a deep mystery. Kepler was measuring the movements of the planets, and the theologians all told him that the planets should move in circles. And Kepler realized that was not the case. But he said, I bet you, based on faith, that there is a divine plan for the motions of the planets that is far more ingenious, mathematical, symmetrical, and beautiful than anything you have thought up so far. And when he revealed Kepler's laws, he said, I found it. This is, if you will, God's plan for the universe. There's a deeper point we're getting at here. Earlier, Christopher said, what does Christianity do that's different? Why can't an atheist do the same? He's written a book denouncing...
That's not what he said. His challenge is to name one thing that a theist can do for their religion that an atheist could not.
One moral thing. One thing that is
one
moral
thing,
that a theist can do. So yeah, it's more challenging than that. But also, Dinesh's story is kind of self-defeating because he's right that the theologians at the time assumed everything would move in circles because it's perfect. Why would they get that idea? Like, what does the Bible have to say about planetary orbits? At plot twist, it doesn't. Which is weird for a book full of all knowledge from an all-knowing God, but okay.
Yeah.
And then Kepler found an answer that was contrary to what the theologians had to say on the matter. Now, you could say, well, he's discovering the laws of nature, which you might say are reading the blueprints of God, but that's, it's circular, it involves presupposition and whatnot.
Yeah, it's begging the question,
Yeah. But the underlying fact is that the religion, the doctrine put forth by the holy men, was wrong.
Yeah. As it has been for a long time. Like on just about everything. Sickness isn't an affliction given by God or witches or anything of the sort. It was wrong about that. It was wrong about the effects of dead bodies. It's been wrong about almost everything over its lifespan. Why? Wow.
Mother Teresa, somewhat irreverently called the missionary position. I do want to tell you a very brief story about this and then try to say why someone like Mother Teresa might be an object of such derision. Mother Teresa was in Calcutta, apparently hugging a leper, at which point an Indian walking by casually said to her, I wouldn't do that for all the money in the world. And she replied, I wouldn't either. I'm doing it for the love of Christ.
Does he know that Mother Teresa withheld drugs from people that would have eased their pain because she thought suffering was holy? He doesn't know, does he? He has no idea. I don't think
he does, because you could hear Hitch in the background going, "Oh, for the love of Christ!"
Yeah.
And the point I'm trying to get at here is, I can see him champing at the bit, and before I turn it over to you, I want to give an explanation for why he's champing at the bit. Religion makes moral demands on us, and Christianity asks that we move outside of ourselves and consider first the welfare of the other person. Now,
a lot of systems make that moral demand. It's not unique to Christianity. It didn't come from Christianity. It's not a Christian thing. It's a human thing.
Christianity finds ways around that obligation to our fellow beings.
this is ultimately a little bit of an annoying and an irritating and a difficult doctrine. Even Augustine prayed, "Make me chaste, O Lord," but not yet. The Christian feels this too. The atheist, I want to suggest, is chafing under the moral rules of Christianity. That's the concentration camp he's talking about. Ultimately, he realizes that a life lived according to the 10 Commandments is a life in which we are accountable. We all...
The 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell?
Yeah, you know, the thing that starts out with, there are other gods, but you should worship me mostest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know how you're supposed to, you know, thou shalt worship no other god but me. Sort of says don't worship other gods. Well, I'm not worshiping other gods. I passed that one. You know, thou shalt not murder. Yep, passed it. Thou shalt not steal. Yep, got that one. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Yeah, got it. What are you talking about?
Honor thy father and mother.
Yep.
Oh, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. I'm not sure what the fuck that means, but
it'd be hilarious if this was done on a Saturday. It really would. It would be. Yeah. So does Dinesh do that? I don't know. You know, but none of these have any relation to how we live in modern times, except for the murder and theft ones.
Oh, and the other 10 Commandments. Forget ye not the feast of unleavened bread. That's a mortal sin. And I bet Dinesh doesn't even know when the Feast of Unleavened Bread is.
I don't. I got to admit, I have no idea.
Live in a world where bad guys sometimes make off with the money, where good guys come to grief. It's not fair. What goes around doesn't come around. But religion says that at the end of the day, what goes around does come around. There is a last judgment. There is an ultimate accountability. I would suggest that as human beings, we chafe under that. We hate the idea that our actions are ultimately accountable, that even the things that we do in private and in the dark are under scrutiny and are being recorded. Atheism is a massive rebellion against that.
No, that's no. Like, it's nice to think that everybody that has wronged you is going to get comeuppance, that there's going to be fairness after everything wrong that's happened. That is wishful thinking. Like, I don't know a lot of people out there that's like, oh no, I really don't want there to be wonderful justice after all is said and done. You know, I don't want things to be just or fair.
Yeah, it's a revenge fantasy. It's God is on my side and he will smite my enemies. Someday that nasty, you know, Mother Teresa person is going to get what's coming to her, even if no one in this life has the power to do that.
And how often have you heard that from like a frustrated theist who has, you know, sort of not been able to argue the case and they're frustrated and they say, oh, you'll find out, you know, it's that wishful thinking. You know, I'm going to go to heaven and you're going to go to hell. Haha, I win. Do you? You don't have a shred of evidence for that. All you do is just, you know, makes you feel better.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of one of Dark Matter 2525's cartoons, where a person appears in the afterlife, basically, and he's very low resolution. And then one of the people there in the afterlife comes and like restores his resolution, and he says, "I'm very sorry, you weren't supposed to be here. There was a glitch right at the moment you died." And he's like, "What do you mean a glitch?" And he explains, you know, humans on Earth are AIs, and Earth is a simulation for testing their morality, basically, because you can't program morality because it's an AI. So it has to be like tested organically, and the ones that are moral are kept, and the ones that aren't are deleted, and we try again with new ones and so forth. And he said, "Well, what do you mean I didn't pass the morality test? I was a Christian." And the person explains, "Well, yeah, that was the morality test. Like, people who see all this blatantly horrible shit in this religion. Slavery is good. Stone your daughter for disrespect. If you marry someone who's not a virgin, she's to be executed. All of this crap. And you go, oh, but the book says that God is good, so I'm just going to overlook all of this. You've abrogated your entire moral responsibility. That's the test. It clearly says horrible shit, and it says in the book, this is good. And you just go along with, you have no morals of your own, so you need to be deleted. Thanks for playing, though.
Thanks for playing.
But it disguises itself as moving along the strict pathways of reason. It's not an intellectual revolt, it's a moral revolt.
That's it. That's the end of the clip. Well.
Huzzah!
Sorry, I've got to stop screen. So what did you think of the entire D'Souza and Hitchens debate, my good friend Ember?
I mean, Dinesh's... What's the opposite of impressive? Disappointing? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't even compelling enough. Like, I don't think we got a single Hitch slap out of that, because there just wasn't anything of enough substance for Hitch to work with.
Right.
It was just kind of milquetoast apologetics.
And just a whole bunch of just some really bad theist claims, you know, like claiming that compassion comes from Christianity is so obviously untrue. I don't know how he could just stand there and say that.
I like Reed's comment. His arguments were numinous.
Numinous, yeah. His arguments were numinous. Well, the evidence of his arguments were numinous. I think his arguments were very evident to the senses, Reed. I think I heard them. Maybe I didn't believe them, but I heard them because holy crap, you know. And sort of special pleading, like, you know, you need evidence for things except when it's your religious belief. Why?
Yeah, I mean, to his credit, the one thing that he was correct and rational about was that he admitted that he's agnostic. Like, he believes because he chooses to believe, because he wants to believe, but he doesn't know.
Right.
And as I often say, yeah, people tell me, well, you don't claim that there's no God possible, so you're not really an atheist, you're agnostic. I'm like, no, I'm an atheist definitionally because I don't believe in any particular God. I'm agnostic because I can't rule out the possibility that there might be something that we might call a God under some colloquial definition or another. I just don't know. But the truth of the matter is, nobody does. If any believer had knowledge, they could demonstrate the factual existence of their God, then pretty much everybody would believe in that specific religion.
Well, that was the low point of D'Souza. That's when I went, this guy is an absolute joke. Because saying, well, I don't know, therefore I believe because I don't know was his actual words. He's trying to equate the basically we both don't know if a God in fact exists or not. We both don't claim to know, but it's exactly the same amount of evidence for and against when you have literally zero evidence of a God and billions of natural processes. You're basically saying, well, the natural world, we know that exists. Both of us agree that exists. But in order for me to believe your God claim, you need to present some evidence. And then saying, well, we both don't know, and you've got no evidence that doesn't exist. Yeah, I've got no evidence that flying unicorn, magical invisible unicorns don't exist either, Dinesh. Doesn't mean that it's just as rational to say that, well, if you believe they exist, that's totally fine. It's a shifting of the burden of proof. It's basically saying, well, I'll believe until you prove it doesn't exist. How do you prove something doesn't exist?
It's a tricky proposition. We
Yeah.
can pull it off sometime. It's related to the impossibility of the contrary. Like if we, like I often say, we can prove the Earth is not flat because we can prove that it's round, and because we can prove that it's round, it automatically excludes all the other possibilities. Now that we know the truth, all the things that aren't that are ruled out. And we can do that with a lot of things.
But that is falsifiable. We're talking about sort of unfalsifiable things that can never be proved in any way, proved to be false.
Yeah, and that's an evolutionary thing in and of itself. Like we've discussed before about how Craig's version of the Kalam alters the equation so that it's anything that begins to exist has a cause. So he can special plead away God by saying, well, it didn't begin to exist. No, did it? It was always there. Well, how do you
that was the
demonstrate
original
that?
Kalam, that was the original Kalam, but yes.
Yeah, but that was a modification on the older idea of the universe must have been created, therefore there must be a creator. Well, eventually somebody said, well, what created that creator? And then you get the Kalam with, oh, well, it's only things that begin to exist need a creator.
Yeah. Shifting some goalposts right there.
Yeah, all the modern apologetics are band-aids on previous broken apologetics.
Yeah, and they keep recycling them, just pulling them out of the trash and running them one more time. And it's really weird because you see, like, they obviously haven't worked for the Christian apologists, and you see the Muslim apologists digging into their bag and sort of coming out with apologetics 5-10 years old, and it's like, guys, this didn't work for them. I mean, I saw someone pull out Pascal's wager the other day. It's like, that's kind of dead in the water, guys. You probably want to stop using that. It's
and the way they fight each other over things too. Like I was randomly reviewing a Kent Hovind video the other day. I thought it was a different Kent Hovind video and that we'd get to something that I particularly wanted to talk about, but I'd grabbed the wrong one apparently. And at the end of the video, he just goes off on the Shroud apologists. You know, he's just like, all these Shroud people, oh, there's proof of this, proof of that. And he's like, fucking Kent Hovind, the man who will deny the diversification of dog species directly to your face, is shredding these Shroud fools by saying, well, you know, John describes Jesus's burial cloth as a series of sticks, and the shroud is a single sheet, so that can't be it. Okay, buy my DVD.
Yeah, this is Mr. Luna Bakaki, who thinks that asteroid craters were caused by the rocks shot up into the air from the fountains of the deep opening in the flood. Yes, this man is, but I mean, it's hilarious because he'll also go, oh, flat earthers are stupid, but the earth is 6,000 years old.
It's fantastic. So I love it when they go after each other. It's hilarious. But the point is, the apologetics are not even convincing to each other.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a fair point. Yeah. But I've had a blast, Ems. I think we've got next up is the great DC versus Marvel debate, which you are participating in, along with Al Trucker is taking the DC side. It should be tons of fun. So please do come along to that if you're up early enough in the United States, or if you're chilling out in Australia or down underside. Come along and see Ember represent the Marvel multiverse, I guess, Marvel universe. So yeah, should be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. We will have the amazing Jess, How to Rule an Asteroid, with us as well, helping me out in hosting this eventful performance. So yeah, should be fun. Do you have anything coming up soon, Ember?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the debate in a few hours now.
Yes,
but aside from that, my normal Sunday show, I've got now that Doc Dino is back from his trip, he's gonna come over, join me on Sunday. We're gonna do some creationist correction. That should be pretty fun. And then Doc is
correction.
Yeah, and Doc is going to be on Bad Science Sunday this week, as I understand it. So you'll get a double dose of Doc. Come watch him over at my place, and then my stream will forward to Maya's, and yeah, all kinds of good things.
Name. I love that name. You know how I feel about alliteration. For some reason, I've got this big boner for alliteration. I don't know why. I just like it.
It's just fun.
But that's awesome. But I'm probably going to head over to Doc's celebration for at least a little bit. I'm very tired, but I certainly will drop in and hang out for a little bit. Yeah, and I will redirect the stream over there if you do have some more time. Come over to Doc's, and we're gonna just chill out for a bit and wish Doc the best, because he is a friend of the channel, has been for a long time, and a really cool guy. So yeah, that should be lots of fun. But yeah, as always, be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Don't try to credit your religion for compassion of all things. It's not a good look. It really shows a bit of arrogance there. But yeah, be kind, because that's how societies work and that's how morality works. So thank you so much, everybody, and do like and subscribe as well. I shouldn't forget to say that. But thank you, everybody.
Too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. If you could, I would really appreciate it. But do have a fantastic one, and I will see you in the next debate dissection. Bye-bye.